Chapter 2092. Dugu Mabao leaped into the air and arrived in front of the two of them in an instant. He landed on the sand dune and raised his wrist gently. The separated lake quickly closed and returned to its original calm state. "Don't worry, we're all fine." Chu Luiyue breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that. That's good. She had been very worried when she heard Diwu Xianxia talk about the dangerous moon. It seemed to be very serious and dangerous. Diwu Xianxia and the other two weren't ordinary people. Until now, Chu Luiyue still didn't know how strong they were. The only thing she was sure of was that they were definitely more powerful than she expected. Even they found this dangerous moon tricky. It was not hard to imagine how dangerous the situation was. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue's eyes focused and stared at Dugu Mabao. Dugu Mabao noticed something and asked, "What's wrong?" Chu Luiyue did not speak. She walked straight to Dugu Mabao and pointed at his collar. "What's this?" Dugu Mabao was taken aback as he lowered his head to take a look. Only then did he see that his collar was stained with blood. The blood was only the size of a fingernail and had already soaked into his clothes. It was very inconspicuous. But Chu Luiyue's eyes were sharp and saw it at a glance. Dugu Mabao frowned slightly. It should have been accidentally stained when he vomited blood at the end. Because she came at such a coincidence, he did not have time to check it carefully before coming out. "It's a little blood." Dugu Mabao looked up. The expression in his eyes had returned to calmness. "It's inevitable to get injured in the dangerous moon, but it's not a big deal." After he finished speaking with a thought, a ray of light flashed and the blood stain disappeared completely. Under the illumination of the sun, his clothes were like armor, glowing with a delicate and light light. His tone was casual, as if he did not take this matter to heart at all. Chu Luiyue scrutinized him, as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth. Dugu Mabao looked at her quietly. Chu Luiyue felt a little helpless. Debao looked like a child, but in reality he was an old fox who had lived for countless years. His intelligence and means were not lacking. If he really wanted to hide something, it should be very difficult for her to detect it. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, but Chu Luiyue couldn't see anything. In the end he could only give up. "It's good that you're all right." She looked at the calm lake again. "Where are Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Xiao? Why didn't he come out?" If it was in the past, they would have greeted her the moment she entered the Red Moon Desert. This time, however, it was strangely quiet. After Diwu merged with that aura, he has been recuperating. Lan Xiao is thinking about reconstructing his divine body. Dugu Mabao's answer was flawless. Chu Luiyue calmed down a little. Hearing Shiyan mention the god body, he remembered the purpose of this trip. "By the way, Debao, speaking of this, I have something to ask you." "Speak." Chu Luiyue paused and asked word by word. "Previously, when you reconstructed your divine body, how did you do it?" Dugu Mabao looked at her strangely. "Weren't you there at that time too?" She should be the one who knew best how he did it. Chu Luiyue shook her head. "No, what I mean is that ordinary cultivators can't do it with their own strength, but you..." Dugu Mabao's eyes showed a hint of dissatisfaction. "I'm not an ordinary cultivator. Of course I can do it." Who was she questioning? Chu Luiyue. It had been so long, so his arrogant and conceited personality hadn't changed at all. She suddenly let out a long sigh of relief and couldn't help but rub Debao's hair. Debao's expression changed. Just as he was about to flare up, he heard Chu Luiyue sigh. "Hearing you say that, I'm relieved." Debao was still the same Debao. If he could say something like that, it meant that the situation should be fine. Hearing this, Debao paused. He looked up and saw her smiling brightly as if she had heaved a sigh of relief. The anger in his heart suddenly disappeared without a trace. Chu Luiyue was a little curious and asked excitedly, "So, your strength is really above the venerable gods?" Debao tilted his head and looked at her impatiently. His face said, "Do you still need to ask such nonsense?" Chu Luiyue retracted her hand in embarrassment. Big brother, I can't afford to offend him. You came this time to ask about this?" Debao's voice was already full of undisguised disdain. Chu Luiyue shook her head. "No, I came this time to do two things. The first thing I want to ask is, do you know how to help a 9th-stage warrior reconstruct his physical body? I've read many books, but I couldn't find the answer." Dugu Mabao narrowed his eyes. "Who do you want to help?" Chu Luiyue immediately told him about Su Li. "There's really no other way, so I thought that maybe you would know. It's a small matter." He interrupted Chu Luiyue. "What's the second thing?" Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. He actually knew. However, before she could be shocked, she immediately said when she heard Dugu Mabao's question. The second thing is, I thought that I helped you reconstruct your divine body before, so I came this time to help Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Xiao. Before she could finish speaking, Dugu Mabao's face darkened. No. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Why not? There's no why. Dugu Mabao's attitude was very firm. I said no and it means no. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2093. His voice traveled to the bottom of the lake. Lan Xiao finally couldn't help but scold. Dithi, what's wrong with him? You already said that she wants to help. Why did he reject her? Does that mean that you can help him? I haven't said anything yet. Diwu Zhangzi glanced at him. Then you can go and say it now. They were trapped here and couldn't go out except for the night of the Red Moon. However, the entire Red Moon desert was under their control. As long as they spoke, that girl outside would definitely hear them. You want to help? Of course not. Then why are you talking about it? Lan Xiao looked up. Wants to help me. What's the point of rejecting her? Even if I want to reject her, I have to say it personally. It wasn't easy for you to show concern for him, but before he could get anything he was mercilessly stopped by Debao. Who could stand this? Diwu Zhangzi reminded him. That girl can't come in now and you can't go out either. You can't handle this. Lan Xiao rolled his eyes. You only know how to pour cold water on me. Who said that she can't come in? Isn't Rongxiu here too? As long as he's willing to help, Diwu Zhangzi coughed. Lower your voice, Debao can hear you. Lan Xiao choked, and his initial arrogance was immediately extinguished. Also, don't forget what your face looks like now. Do you really want to see her like this? This sentence hit the nail on the head. Lan Xiao was enlightened, then he hugged his head in pain. How could I forget about this? He lay down on the side weakly and felt sorry for himself. My peerless beauty is ruined just like that. Diwu Zhangzi closed his eyes and couldn't be bothered with him. That face of his was changed every day, and he didn't seem to be in pain. Besides, when was he not like this? What was there to cry about? Chu Luiyue didn't expect Debao to reject so firmly and was stunned for a moment. Looking at Debao's solemn little face, she was full of doubts. It shouldn't be, didn't I help Debao before? Helping Lan Xiao this time shouldn't be a problem. Moreover, Debao and the other two were very close. Logically speaking, Debao had no reason to reject her. Are you sure? Debao's expression did not change. He raised his eyes and looked at her steadily. That won't do. Last time was just an accident. The same thing will not happen again. Chu Luiyue was about to persuade him again when Debao continued, Lan Xiao isn't useless. He will settle this matter himself. If he really can't, there's still me and Diwu. You don't have to worry anymore. That one sentence had pretty much sealed off all possibilities. Chu Luiyue frowned. She really didn't know what Debao was thinking. But from the looks of it, he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. She thought for a moment and nodded. All right. Since you've said so, then I won't interfere. However, you promised to help Mr. Su before, so I'll start right here. If there's anything wrong, it's convenient for me to ask you at any time, right? Debao frowned slightly. It was really inconvenient to keep her here at this time, but if he rejected her now, it would arouse her suspicion again. She had always been smart. After thinking for a moment, he finally nodded. Okay. Under the scorching sun, the heat wave in the desert was overwhelming. Chu Luiyue stood on a sand dune and summoned the heavenly square cauldron. Mr. Su, you can come out first. As soon as she finished speaking, Su Li's figure flew out. She came to Chu Luiyue's side and looked around, only to find that there was no one else here except for Rongxiu and Chu Luiyue. She was stunned for a moment and asked cautiously, where's the senior you mentioned? Before coming to the Red Moon Desert this time, Chu Luiyue told her that she planned to come to the Red Moon Desert to look for a senior. That senior might have a way to solve her problem. But as far as the eye could see, there was only yellow sand everywhere. There was no one at all. Chu Luiyue smiled. That senior doesn't like to see strangers, so he has already gone back. But don't worry, Mr. Su. He does know how to help you reconstruct your physical body. I invited you out because I'm going to use the heavenly square cauldron to refine medicine for you. Su Li's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Chu Luiyue nodded with a smile. Of course. She knew that Dugu Mabao and the others didn't like too many people knowing that they were here, so before coming she had already thought about it and decided not to reveal these things first. Along the way, although Su Li stayed in the heavenly square cauldron, now that the heavenly square cauldron had recognized Chu Luiyue as its master, she only needed to think about it to hide these things from Su Li. After asking Debao, she officially invited Su Li out. Of course, before that, she and Rongxiu had already changed places. The Red Moon Desert was vast and boundless, and the place where the lake was located was the most central and also the most confidential location. And this place was quite a distance from there, so there was no need to worry about being discovered. Su Li didn't suspect anything and immediately nodded in understanding. Since that senior even knew this, he must be a very powerful person. It was normal for such a powerful existence to not like the secular world. Then, please thank that senior for me. Su Li said seriously. Also, I've really troubled you with this matter. Chu Luiyue smiled. Mr. Su, don't be in a hurry to say these things. I know the method, but whether it will work or not is still unknown. It won't be too late to thank you after you really reconstruct your physical body. Su Li shook her head and smiled with her dimples. Whether it succeeds or not, Su Li will remember this kindness in her heart. Chu Luiyue blinked. Although Su Li had extremely high attainments in refining weapons and was considered famous in the entire Divine Ruins world, she didn't have much experience in the world and her personality was still pure and kind. It was no wonder that Tang Ku had deep feelings for her. She curled her lips into a smile and whispered, "You can just wait by the side first." Su Li nodded and walked to the side. She nodded and greeted Rongxiu and then began to wait quietly. Chu Luiyue took out the medicinal herbs according to the prescription given by De Bao and arranged them in order beside her. After a while, all kinds of boxes were densely packed around her. There were at least a few hundred kinds. But the key was that she didn't seem to be stopping until now. Su Li watched from the side and couldn't help but feel nervous. So many medicinal herbs? Chu Luiyue said while taking the medicinal herbs. Yes, the level of the pill to be refined this time is not low, so a lot of medicinal herbs are needed. Su Li frowned slightly. It wasn't that she had never seen a celestial physician refining medicine, but such a lineup still surprised her. What level is it? Why is it so troublesome? Chu Luiyue paused and looked over. Great physician. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2094. What? Su Li was shocked. She couldn't help but widen her eyes. She almost suspected that she had heard wrongly. A grand physician level pill? A grand physician was a level above that of a physician. It was the highest level of celestial physician. Even in Lingxiao College, there were very few celestial physicians who could reach this level. And they were basically elders who were very old. For example, Elder Wan Zheng. He could be considered one of the top celestial physician elders in Lingxiao College. However, he was already more than 100 years old when he broke through to become a grand physician. Chu Luiyue was not even 20 years old now, but she was challenging to refine a grand physician level pill. It was no wonder that Su Li had such a big reaction. In front of Chu Luiyue, Su Li couldn't say that she doubted her ability. However, even if she didn't say it, Chu Luiyue knew what she was thinking. Mr. Su, whether I succeed or not, I have to give it a try. If I succeed, everything will be fine. What do you think? In fact, not long after she recovered her memory, she had already broken through to become a physician. As for a grand physician, although she hadn't broken through yet, she had vaguely touched the threshold of that level. It just so happened that this was a rare opportunity. Even if it was difficult, she had to give it a try. Su Li looked at her determined expression and inexplicably calmed down a lot. Someone who could make the celestial shield recognize him as its master must be extraordinary. She clenched her fists and cautioned carefully, "Okay, but you must be careful. Just try your best. Don't force it." She didn't want to implicate Chu Luiyue because of her. Chu Luiyue smiled. "Don't worry, I know what to do." After saying that, she began to take out the herbs again. Fortunately, she was well prepared. She had all the herbs she needed. Otherwise, this trip would be troublesome. After a while, she finally prepared all the herbs. Just in case, she prepared 5 sets. If she failed, she could still try a few more times. After confirming that everything was fine, Chu Luiyue came in front of the heavenly square cauldron and hit it with her palm. Boom! A ball of transparent flame began to burn. Chu Luiyue began to methodically put the medicinal herbs around him in one after another. Her movements were very fast but also very smooth. When these herbs fell into the heavenly square cauldron, they were quickly divided into several parts of the flames that devoured and refined them. Soon, a faint bitter medicinal fragrance filled the air. Su Li murmured in surprise. Is this really the level of a doctor? She had seen many doctors before, but none of them could be compared to Chu Luiyue. Whether it was the control of the flame, the selection of the herbs, or the control of the entire process, Chu Luiyue could be said to be the best. Su Li couldn't help but look at Rongxiu, who was next to her, but she saw that his expression was the same as usual. He was calm and composed without the slightest hint of surprise. It was as if he had expected Chu Luiyue to do this. Suli couldn't help but sigh in her heart. From the moment she left the wind separation cave, she knew that these two people were not simple. But she also didn't expect them to be so powerful. During this period she had stayed with Chu Luiyue in Peach Blossom Cove for some time and heard a lot about Chu Luiyue. Naturally, this included the battle between Chu Luiyue and Yi Wentao. He fought against Her Eminence in the High God realm and won in the end. Since then he had dominated Peach Blossom Cove. Suli had always thought that Chu Luiyue's talent as a martial artist and a Xian master was the best, but now she realized that she was very wrong. This person had the most outstanding talent in every aspect of cultivation. Time passed slowly. Suli watched from the side as Chu Luiyue refined the herbs bit by bit. Her initial shock gradually turned into acceptance. Most of the cultivators in this world were partial talents. They were extremely talented in only one aspect of cultivation and were lacking in other aspects. She herself was the best example. Even after she became a weapon refining saint, her cultivation as a martial artist was still at rank 9 and she couldn't even break through to become a high god. Even if there were some people who had 2 or more talents at the same time, it was actually very difficult for them to do well in all aspects. This was because it required a lot of time and energy. It was already very difficult for an ordinary person to focus on one thing and stand out in one aspect, let alone others. But Chu Luiyue, this was truly heaven-defying. Suli sighed silently in her heart. Martial artist, Xian master, weapon refiner, celestial physician, she did all of them extremely well. Not to mention people of the same age, even many elders who had cultivated for many years might not be able to do better than her. This really depended on talent. Of course, it also depended on hard work. Both were indispensable. Other than that, Chu Luiyue also contracted 2 divine beasts, which were closely related to the 2 ancient divine beast clans. Such a person was simply too terrifying. Chu Luiyue focused on the heavenly square medicine cauldron in front of her. At this moment she had already refined over 100 herbs. And this wasn't even half of it. While controlling the heat, she kept recalling the prescription that Debao gave her in her mind. She was extremely cautious and didn't dare to relax at all. However, what made her feel a little relieved was that she realized that her alchemy skills had indeed increased compared to before. Although she hadn't been able to take out much time to refine pills during this period of time, it seemed to be easier than expected due to the increase in her abilities in all aspects. She continued to put the remaining herbs in one by one. On the other side, Dugu Mabao had already returned to the bottom of the lake. As soon as he returned, Lan Xiao harumphed harshly and turned around. Dugu Mabao obviously didn't care as he walked straight to his seat and sat down. Diwu Xianxia pointed up and asked tentatively, "Debao, did you just give the girl the prescription for the soul-concentrating pill? That's a master physician level pill." Dugu Mabao closed his eyes as if he didn't want to bother. However, Diwu Xianxia couldn't hold it in and continued asking. "The girl wants to help that Mr. Su reconstruct the body of a stage 9 warrior. Actually, a Qingyang pill of the doctor level is enough. Why did you?" Before he could finish, he suddenly realized something and widened his eyes abruptly as he pointed at Dugu Mabao with a trembling finger. Dugu Mabao opened his eyes and said calmly, "I did it on purpose. I did it on purpose." What? Wonderful book house. Chapter 2095. You did it on purpose. Why are you still asking me what's wrong? Looking at Dugu Mabao's self-righteous face, Diwu Xianxia almost scolded him. You really? Meeting that pair of cold purple eyes, Diwu Xianxia's strong desire to live forced him to swallow the words that he was about to blurt out. He gave him a thumbs up and praised him insincerely. You're so smart. The coldness on Dugu Mabao's face faded a little. It's been so long yet you're still a doctor. It'll be even worse if you don't spur her on. Since she came here on her own this time, it's a rare opportunity. Diwu Xianxia was speechless. Although it wasn't the first time Dugu Mabao did something like this. But every time he could set a new low and set a new record. He was quite impressive. But every time he had a good reason and made others speechless. Of course, this others was mainly referring to him and Lan Xiao. The reason why they succumbed time and time again was purely due to Dugu Mabao's authority. After hesitating for a while, he couldn't help but ask. Debao, I know you're doing this for Yuer's sake, but she's still a doctor now. She hasn't even looked at the prescription of a doctor. You suddenly came and wanted her to try refining this level of pill. Isn't that making things difficult for her? Exactly. Lan Xiao stood up abruptly, crossed his arms and sneered. It's so difficult to refine that soul-consolidating pill. If there's a mistake, All the previous efforts will be wasted and it'll be a complete failure. It's fine if this pill refinement fails, but what if the girl gets hurt? He was already furious because Dugu Mabao had rejected Yuer's help for him. Now that he heard this, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Dugu Mabao glanced at the two of them coldly. Who said she hasn't seen it? You. The two were about to argue, but their expressions changed when they heard him. What do you mean? Dugu Mabao brushed the non-existent dust off his clothes and said calmly, She's seen it a few years ago. Diwu Xianxia frowned. That's not right. You didn't show her a doctor's prescription? His voice suddenly stopped as he stared at Dugu Mabao in disbelief. Lan Xiao suddenly realized something too. You bastard. You mixed in the prescription of the great doctor? No. Dugu Mabao was calm and composed. I added some doctor's points into the prescription of a grand doctor. Chu Luiyuan naturally didn't know what was happening under the lake. She just felt a little strange. Although she had never seen the formula for the soul-concentrating pill, she found that it was much easier to refine than she had imagined. There were indeed many types and quantities of these medicinal herbs, but it was not troublesome to arrange them according to the order. However, this thought only flashed through her mind for a moment before she quickly suppressed it. If he could successfully refine it, it would naturally be for the best. Rong Xiao stood with his hands behind his back, quietly watching from the side. Suddenly, a gentle breeze blew over. An extremely faint fragrance filled the air. His brows moved slightly as he turned to look. That was the direction of Mirror Lake. And he couldn't be more familiar with this fragrance. It was the scent of the dancing lotus. He stared at it for a while, and there seemed to be waves gradually surging in his deep eyes. Then he moved his fingers slightly and a golden light flashed past. That faint fragrance quickly dissipated. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2096. This minute ripple did not attract Chu Liyue's attention. She concentrated on refining the various medicinal herbs in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron. Just this point alone consumed her an entire day's time. When night fell, she finally put the last medicinal herb in. The Red Moon Desert at night was exceptionally cold. On the sand dunes, a thin layer of frost seemed to have condensed. The cold air was bone-piercing. But fortunately, this was not considered a problem to Chu Liyue. In front of her, the transparent flame in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron burned continuously. The fire clearly lit up the surroundings. Under the dark sky, this wisp of fire was especially conspicuous. An increasingly rich medicinal fragrance spread out from within. Chu Liyue held her breath. The medicinal herbs were already refined. The next thing to do was to condense the pill. This step was even more complicated and hard to determine. The slightest bit of carelessness would result in a complete loss. Hence, Chu Liyue was even more cautious at this time. She started to fuse these medicinal herbs bit by bit. Su Li gasped in amazement as she watched by the side. So many medicinal herbs. Even if you let me remember, I also can't remember. You not only can put them in order, she can even control the fire and fuse their medicinal properties together. Truly incredible. She knew nothing about celestial physician. But she could also see how hard it was to refine this grand physician-level medicinal pill. And Chu Liyue was still so young. If she succeeds this time, she should be able to become the youngest grand physician in the Divine Ruins world, right? Su Li heaved a long sigh. Even if she did not succeed, looking at Chu Liyue's series of skilled reactions, she should also not be far from breaking through. Condense. Chu Liyue gave a clear cry. The flame in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron suddenly pounced. All the medicinal herbs thoroughly gathered. A fist-sized medicinal pill gradually took shape. But right at this time, an explosive energy suddenly rushed out from that medicinal pill. Chu Liyue secretly cursed. She immediately controlled the flame to surge up, attempting to suppress it. However, the power condensed within the pill was too strong. It was simply not something that Chu Liyue could control when it suddenly exploded. Several streams of turbulence directly broke through the encirclement of the flames and rushed towards Chu Liyue. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes, but in the end he restrained his impulse to make a move. Chu Liyue tapped the ground with his toes and quickly set up a barrier in front of him. Boom! Boom! The shockingly violent force fiercely slammed into the barrier in front of Chu Liyue, causing a series of explosions. Chu Liyue only felt a terrifying pressure crushing down on her, causing her feet to sink deep into the sand. Fortunately, this force came and went quickly. In addition, Chu Liyue's summoning barrier was timely enough, so he was not injured. It was a pity that the pill was destroyed. Chu Liyue pulled his feet out of the sand and looked at the medicinal cauldron in front of him. There was only a pile of ashes left in the transparent medicinal cauldron. A faint burnt smell wafted over. Chu Liwei coughed and rubbed her nose. This great doctor-level pill was really not easy to refine. Su Li was worried when she saw this and immediately wanted to go forward. Chu Liwei waved her hand. It's normal to fail in refining pills. What's more, this is my first time trying to challenge this level. It's inevitable that there will be mistakes. But after a few more tries it should be enough. You don't have to worry. Seeing that Chu Liwei seemed to be in a good state, Su Li could only wait quietly in the same place. Chu Liwei tidied up the medicinal cauldron, then closed her eyes and began to recall what went wrong during the refining process. After pondering for a long time, she finally opened her eyes and began the second attempt. With the experience of the first time, the second time was indeed more convenient. However, Chu Liwei did not dare to slack off. At this time, it was already noon of the second day. The frost on the ground had already melted without a trace, and the ground became boiling hot again. Fortunately, Chu Liwei had stayed here for quite some time before, so she was already used to it. The rich medicinal fragrance once again permeated the air. "Sai, I don't know if you will succeed this time." Under the lake, Diwu Zhangzi muttered worriedly. Lan Xiao glanced at him. "Be content. To be able to do this on her first try, she's already 1 in a million." Diwu Zhangzi snorted. "If it were someone else, I naturally wouldn't have such hopes. But you, isn't someone else. Besides, didn't Debao say that he had already shown her many great doctor-level prescriptions? With her comprehension, what can't she do? Debao, don't you think so?" It would have been fine if he didn't mention this, but now that he did, Lan Xiao was speechless. He quickly glanced at Dugu Mabao. Only he would do such a wicked thing and he still has the cheek to say it? Isn't he afraid that she won't know what's important and will practice it wrongly? Dugu Mabao's expression didn't change. She accepted all those Shen formations back then, let alone these prescriptions. "Lan Xiao, don't think that everyone in the world is like you just because you're stupid." Lan Xiao was furious and was about to get up, but he forgot that he was still chained up and was pulled back again. He was just a soul now, and logically speaking he shouldn't feel any pain. However, these chains were very strange. Once he moved too much they would punish him. A dark light flashed across the chains, and Lan Xiao's aura instantly withered. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. You're in the worst situation now. Stay here obediently and don't torment yourself." Lan Xiao clenched his teeth and laughed. If it was back then, how could such a small thing trap me?" Dugu Mabao said calmly. "Since you know it's not like back then, don't force yourself. Based on your current situation, it'll be extremely difficult for you to condense a divine body." At the mention of this, Lan Xiao finally fell silent. He half leaned against the wall behind him, lowered his head, and didn't speak for a long time. Diwu Zhangzi nodded. "Big Bao is right. It wasn't easy to get through the dangerous months and you can rest well." Speaking of this, he looked at Dugu Mabao with a headache. "But this is easy to say, but it's very troublesome to do. Especially now that Yuer is still here. When she was here in the past, the situation wasn't so bad. Every time there was a dangerous month, they could use all kinds of reasons to send her away. They didn't need to spend much effort to hide everything. But now, I don't know how long she'll stay here this time. If the dangerous months come again," Dugu Mabao pondered for a long time. "I keep feeling that she seems to have sensed something. If she can't personally witness you and Lan Xiao recovering your divine bodies, she probably won't leave so easily. On the surface she said that she came this time to help Su Li, but after meeting and talking with her, Dugu Mabao knew that this wasn't her only purpose." Diwu Zhangzi frowned. "This is troublesome. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2097. That time in Dugu Mabao was already extremely dangerous, and it definitely couldn't happen a second time. However, with their current situation, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to condense a divine body. Dugu Mabao was silent for a moment and said, "I'll take care of it." 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Liwei looked at the heavenly square medicine cauldron that was once again filled with flying ash and sighed helplessly. "I failed again?" This was already the 4th time she had failed. During these few times of refining pills, she had always been very cautious and careful, and every time she would seriously learn from the previous failure. However, it was useless. The result was still failure every time. Even this time, she herself felt that there should be no problem. Lines had even begun to appear on the pill, but it was always a little short. Where exactly is the difference? Chu Liwei crossed her arms and rested her chin on one hand. She stared at the heavenly square medicine cauldron in front of her with a solemn gaze. The process of refining pills these few times kept replaying in her mind. She thought about it bit by bit, but she still didn't know where the problem was. After such a long time of high concentration, her mind and strength were consumed extremely quickly. She gently rubbed her temples. Rongxiu said, take a rest first. Chu Luiyue nodded. It wasn't a solution to continue like this. If she didn't have enough energy, the result would be the same even if she tried countless times. Of course, more importantly, the medicinal herbs she had were only enough for her to refine one more time. If she used them up, she would have to go back. But she didn't plan to leave the Red Moon Desert now. She walked to Rongxiu's side and set up a barrier to isolate the terrifying heat. Then she began to cultivate quietly. Rongxiu let Shui out. Go play by yourself. Roar. Shui let out a joyous howl before her snow-white, sturdy figure quickly disappeared from their sight. Those people were all resting now and no one cared about it. Could be free now. When Chu Luiyue heard the commotion, she thought of something and asked in her heart, Dumpling Zichen, do you want to come out for a walk? Although the cultivation environment here could not be compared to that of the Peach Blossom Cove and the Yuntian Tower, it had the advantage of being spacious and sparsely populated. Sure enough, right after he asked, Dumpling immediately raised her hand excitedly. Ayu, I want to go out. She had swallowed too much tianlei some time ago. Now that she had all the strength in her body, she didn't know where to use it. Chu Luiyue smiled and released Dumpling. Go. Remember to come back when you're done playing. Dumpling happily pounced on her. Just as she was about to kiss her, she suddenly felt a chill at the back of her head. She quickly looked up and met Rongxiu's indifferent eyes. Dumpling chuckled and squeezed out a big smile. She obediently stopped what she was doing and changed to a flying kiss. Ayu? Then I'll go now. Chu Luiyue pinched her chubby little face. Got it? Just don't go too crazy. Dumpling nodded vigorously. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she suddenly thought of something. She rolled her eyes and smiled. Zichen, this is a rare opportunity. Why don't we have a fight? Not long after she finished speaking, Zichen's figure slowly appeared. There was still no expression on his handsome and cold face. Okay. Chu Luiyue looked at him in surprise. Strange. Zichen had never been interested in these things. She didn't know what had happened to him today. Why did he agree to fight with Tuanzi? Perhaps it was because he felt that there were no outsiders here, so he was more relaxed? Dumpling didn't think so much. When she saw Zichen agree so readily, her eyes lit up with excitement and she rubbed her palms together. If you lose, you have to acknowledge me as your big sister. She still clearly remembered that she had been suppressed by him in the wind separation cave. Today she had to get it back no matter what. Chu Luiyue held his forehead helplessly. It had been so long, but this girl still remembered the big sister thing. She was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan and had the most noble and purest bloodline. Countless demonic beasts in the world would follow her lead. But she still wanted to be Zichen's big sister. If Zichen was just an ordinary three-eyed eagle, there would be no need to fight. But the key was that Zichen had a part of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline flowing in his body. He was connected to Mao Zhen's bloodline and aura. If Dumpling fought against him, wouldn't it be equivalent to fighting against Mao Zhen? But the great Phoenix Dragon clan had always been on equal footing with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. No matter what, Zichen wouldn't admit defeat easily. These two would probably have a conflict in the future. Zichen looked at Dumpling condescendingly and said indifferently, It's not too late to talk about it when you can do it. Dumpling snorted softly. With a tap of her toes, she transformed into a ball of reddish-gold flames and flew out quickly. Zichen cupped his hands respectfully at Chu Luiyue before following her unhurriedly. The two figures quickly disappeared from sight. Chu Luiyue watched them leave and only retracted her gaze after a while. She wasn't worried about their safety. After all, this was Debeo's territory. Usually no one would come here. Even if they really caused trouble, it shouldn't be a problem. After resting for a while, Chu Luiyue felt that she had finally adjusted her condition and planned to try one last time. If it still didn't work this time, she would have to think of another way. Chu Luiyue stood up and clapped her hands to shake off the sand on her body. Suddenly the ground trembled. Chu Luiyue paused. The sand under her feet began to flow at an astonishing speed. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2098. Chu Luiyue immediately became alert. What's going on? With her as the center, the sand was flowing towards the surroundings. Soon, the ground beneath her feet caved in, and Chu Luiyue's body uncontrollably fell downwards. She felt that something was amiss, so she took a deep breath and flew to the side. However, just as her feet landed on the sand dune, the same thing happened again. The sand in the previous position suddenly stopped moving, and the sand under her feet flowed towards the surroundings again. Chu Luiyue felt uneasy. She changed 2 more positions and found that it was the same. The coarse sand seemed to be attracted by some kind of power, forming a strange whirlpool on the ground. No matter where she went, the whirlpool would follow her. Rong Xiao frowned slightly, and in a flash he came to Chu Luiyue's side. His long arm wrapped around her slender waist. Then a golden flame gushed out from his other hand. The flame quickly formed a boundary, sealing the whirlpool below. Chu Luiyue stood in the air looking down at the situation below. Under the golden flame's seal, the sand no longer flowed outwards, and the whirlpool gradually dissipated. In just a moment, everything returned to its original state. Rong Xiao landed on the ground again with her. This time the whirlpool did not appear again. It was as if what happened just now was just an illusion. However, Chu Luiyue knew that it was not so. Su Li quickly went forward and asked, Are you okay?" Chu Luiyue shook her head gently. Only a few whirlpools appeared and she did not feel any threat. However, this was obviously not normal. What happened just now? Su Li furrowed her brows and looked at the burning golden flame. Rong Xiao raised his finger and the flame quickly flew back. Facing Su Li's question, Chu Luiyue fell into silence, and then shook her head gently. "I don't know either." It wasn't her first time in the Red Moon Desert, but she had never encountered such a situation. She looked at Rong Xiao. "Did you feel something?" Rong Xiao reacted very quickly. Before she could figure out what was going on, Rong Xiao had already made his move. She couldn't help but feel that perhaps Rong Xiao had sensed something. Rong Xiao squinted his eyes and they were deep. He shook his head slightly. "No. I just felt that there was something wrong with the situation. There seemed to be some strange power surging below. But as soon as I made my move, all the fluctuations and aura dissipated. I don't know what it is exactly." Chu Luiyue pursed his lips. Rong Xiao's strength was above hers, so it was normal for him to sense the danger before her. If even he said so, then it would be really difficult to know what was down there. Maybe I should ask De Bao and the rest. Thinking of this, she was suddenly startled. Why didn't De Bao and the rest come out when such a strange situation was discovered in the Red Moon Desert? As soon as this thought appeared, a familiar voice sounded in her ears. "Little you, It was De Bao. Chu Luiyue turned around but found that De Bao didn't appear. From the corner of her eyes, Su Li's expression didn't change, but Rong Xiao hugged her waist tightly. It seemed that only the 2 of them could hear De Bao's voice. Chu Luiyue suppressed the fluctuations in her heart and listened quietly. What happened just now was just an accident. You don't have to take it to heart. Chu Luiyue's lips moved. She didn't think it was an accident, but since De Bao said so, she naturally didn't ask any more. You can continue to refine medicine at ease. Here no one can hurt you. De Bao's voice was indifferent, but it carried a powerful aura and pressure that couldn't be disobeyed. Chu Luiyue felt a little relieved. The corners of her lips curled up slightly and she nodded gently. She knew that De Bao would definitely know her response. Sure enough, De Bao's voice disappeared after that. The desert seemed to have returned to its usual calmness. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao looked at each other, then looked at Su Li and comforted her. "Mr. Su, don't worry. It's not a big deal." Su Li saw that her expression seemed to be much more relaxed, and her heart also calmed down a little. But when she thought of the scene just now, she still felt a little strange. "That's good. This kind of situation shouldn't happen again, right?" Chu Luiyue paused. It shouldn't happen again. Actually, she wasn't sure, but since De Bao said so, she shouldn't be too worried, right? She let out a long breath and walked towards the heavenly square cauldron. Anyway, she had rested enough, so she might as well try again. Perhaps she could succeed this time. She stood in front of the heavenly square cauldron and placed one hand on it. She was about to take action when she suddenly hesitated for a moment. A reddish gold flame gushed out from her palm and poured into the heavenly square cauldron. Looking down from above, a transparent flame was burning in the middle of the cauldron. The outer circle was surrounded by reddish gold flames. As Dumpling continued to open her meridians, her strength continued to increase. The flame that Chu Luiyue could summon also became more powerful day by day. In the past, it could barely compete with the transparent karmic fire. But now it was faintly showing signs of catching up. Chu Luiyue recalled the few times she had refined pills just now. There were no problems in the beginning, but several times she failed at the last step of condensing the pills. She had a bold idea in her heart, but she didn't know if it would work. Thinking of this, she held her breath and concentrated. Then she put the herbs in one by one. With the previous experience, she was now handling these herbs with greater ease. Her series of actions could be said to be like moving clouds and flowing water. Su Li watched from the side and couldn't help but praise. I thought that her first refinement was already outstanding enough. I didn't expect her to be able to do even better. Every time Chu Luiwei refined pills, there was an obvious improvement compared to the previous one. This time, from a bystander's point of view, it was even more pleasing to the eye. It was said that celestial physician emphasized talent. Now it seemed that it was true. At the beginning it was obvious that Chu Luiwei's actions were still a little jerky. But after a few times, her proficiency and sensitivity had almost surpassed all the physicians that Su Li had seen before. Some celestial physician might not be able to do what she did in their lifetime. This could only be explained by the word, talent. When Rong Xiu heard this, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. An extremely faint smile flashed across the corner of his eyes. But this smile quickly disappeared. His gaze silently fell on the spot where the vortex had disappeared, and a frosty look flashed across his eyes. At the same time, the hearts of the three people under the lake were in suspense. Diwu Zhangzi frowned and looked at Dugu Mabao with a worried expression. Debao, isn't the dangerous month already over? Why did that happen again just now? Wonderful book house. Chapter 2099. Dugu Mabao's face darkened as he closed his eyes. I don't know either. Logically speaking, that thing shouldn't have appeared at this time. Maybe it's because the dangerous moon lasted for too long this time, so there's still some influence left. But we've already eliminated all those forces previously. Why is it still like this? Diwu Zhangzi was still confused. Dugu Mabao fell silent. Lan Xiao, who hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly snorted. 10,000 years have passed. No matter how strong the seal is, there will be signs of loosening. Besides, didn't Lingxiao College already? He didn't finish his sentence, but the other two knew what he meant. He raised his eyebrows and lay back down. Anyway, the following days won't be peaceful. The dark and cramped cage fell into a long silence. The air seemed to have frozen, cold and stagnant. After a long while, Diwu Zhangzi said, no matter what, luckily, Debao acted in time and you didn't notice anything. The moment before Rong Xiu acted, Debao was already one step ahead. Dugu Mabao shook his head. She's always been smart and definitely wouldn't be unaware. Especially today's incident, which was too sudden and strange. She'll definitely be suspicious. She came here this time to help Lan Xiao and Diwu Zhangzi recover their divine bodies. Naturally, she would be more cautious when faced with such a situation. Lan Xiao said lazily, she'll know sooner or later. Don't tell me you think you can hide it from her forever? Dugu Mabao was silent for a moment. At the very least, we have to wait until she becomes a venerable god. A day passed. Chu Luiwei put the last ingredient into the heavenly square cauldron. She stared at it and carefully controlled the flame. When all the medicinal effects started to merge, she made up her mind. Condense. The transparent karmic fire surrounded the center, and a fist-sized pill quickly condensed. Immediately after, Chu Luiwei quickly activated the force in her body and controlled the reddish-gold flames to surge up and completely surround the pill. As the reddish-gold flames spread, the first pattern appeared on the elixir pill. Chu Luiwei was delighted, but he still didn't dare to be careless. That was because there was a time before when veined patterns had already begun to appear on the pill, but he still failed in the end. She didn't dare to relax until the very last moment. As the 2 layers of flames burned, the pill gradually shrank. Not long after, the second pattern appeared on it. The origin power in Chu Luiwei's body was rapidly depleting. At this moment, she couldn't help but rejoice that she had enough origin power stored in her body. Otherwise, if this trend continued, it would be very difficult for him to last until the end. Su Li watched from the side and clenched her fists nervously. The previous few times he had not been able to hold on to this stage. Maybe I'm really going to succeed this time? While Chu Luiwei was concentrating on refining the soul-consolidating pill, Dumpling and Zichen had already started. Boom. A reddish-gold fireball flew out and went straight for Zichen's face. His handsome and cold face was calm as usual. With a slight tilt of his body, he dodged the fireball. Bang. The fireball ran all the way and directly hit a sand dune. In an instant, sand and dust flew everywhere. At the same time, a howl suddenly sounded. Roar. A snow-white figure jumped up from behind the sand dune. A few scattered flames were still burning on its buttocks. Shwa shwa. Dumpling was stunned and widened her grape-like eyes. Why are you here too? Shue frantically rolled around in the sand, trying to extinguish the flames. However, the flames were too powerful and this method didn't work at all. In the end, Shue directly froze its entire body to barely extinguish the flames. Sensing that the burning sensation had finally disappeared, Shue shook its body and shook off the layer of blue ice around it. It turned around and looked at its butt and was instantly enraged. His originally round and chubby buttocks were actually burnt black in several places. The charred fur around it was still wrapped in fine ice shards. It looked very pitiful. Shue trembled. Ow ow. What did she mean by it was here too? It was clearly here first, okay? It was just tired from running one round and found a place to rest, slack off, and enjoy a carefree life. Who knew that just as it fell asleep, its butt would be burned by a ball of fire? Dumpling tiptoed and saw Shue's pitiful appearance. She immediately stuck out her tongue in embarrassment. Ahem, Shue, I really didn't do it on purpose. Don't be angry. Look, you're so powerful. These superficial injuries aren't very serious to you. You'll definitely recover after a period of rest, right? Shue looked at the culprit with grief and indignation. Its face was full of complaints. Its fur. It took so much effort to take care of it. It would take a long time for it to grow back. It thought that it wouldn't have to go back in such a sorry state after coming to the Red Moon Desert this time. Who knew that an even fiercer one would come? Shue almost fainted when it thought about how it would have to look like this for a long time. How would it survive in the future? Dumpling looked at it and felt very embarrassed. So she put one hand on her waist and pointed at Zichen with the other. Look, just now it was because you dodged too quickly that Shue suffered. If you didn't dodge, it wouldn't be like this now. Zichen's brows moved slightly. Since we're fighting, it's normal for me to dodge. If there was anyone to blame, they could only blame Dumpling for attacking too quickly, or Shue for reacting too slowly. Dumpling snorted. You're still talking about it? We've been fighting for so long. I've always been the one attacking and you've always dodged. You've never taken the initiative to attack. This fight is boring. Shue, ow. Weren't we discussing compensation for me? Why are you talking about your fight again? Even if both of you have the bloodline of ancient divine beasts, you can't treat other divine beasts as beasts like that. Zichen said calmly. You haven't used your full strength, so I naturally won't attack. In other words, Dumpling could only barely exchange blows with him if she tried her best. Dumpling gasped when she heard that. You. Just you wait, I'll show you the power of your big sister. Bam. Bam. 2 balls of reddish gold flames gushed out of her eyes. A shocking aura erupted from her body. Zichen narrowed his eyes and spread his feet apart. He put one hand behind his back and raised the other hand slightly, accumulating strength. Shue? Are they going to fight again? What about me? Shue, wait for me to subdue him and make him apologize to you. As Dumpling spoke, she clasped her hands together. The flames around her kept gathering and finally condensed into a reddish gold feather. Go. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2100. As soon as he finished speaking, the golden feather flew out rapidly. It went straight for Zichen. At the same time, a purplish gold stream of light emanated from Zichen's palm and covered his entire hand in the blink of an eye. At first glance, it looked like it was covered in a layer of purplish gold scale armor. A suppressive aura that was not inferior to Dumpling's was emitted from his body. Zichen's body had fused with the great phoenix dragon's bloodline power. Moreover, he had Mao Zhen's support. Once he made a move, it would naturally be extraordinary. He raised his hand abruptly and moved, heading straight for the golden feather. It looked like he really intended to fight head-on. In the blink of an eye, the golden feather had already flown in front of Zichen. The surrounding space was almost torn apart by the astonishing power of the golden feather. Zichen clenched his hand into a fist and punched out violently. Boom! The two forces collided fiercely. Following this loud sound, the violent and vigorous forces began to fight wildly, and the aftershocks continued to spread to the surroundings. 2 extremely intense and bright colors intertwined rapidly in mid-air, dazzling everyone's eyes. The sand on the ground was affected and flew into the air. Shue, who was left to the side, did not have time to react before it ate another mouthful of sand. Its snow-white ball was finally covered by a layer of yellow sand. Shue slowly lowered its head and looked at its dirty appearance. It could not help but grind its teeth. These 2 people were really going too far. Unfortunately, its reaction did not attract the attention of the 2 people on the other side. Tuanzi looked at him with bright eyes, and her heart was thumping excitedly. Zichen was finally willing to make a move. Previously at the Peach Blossom Dock, Zichen's strength was slightly higher than hers. Therefore, she was not convinced and always wanted to find an opportunity to compete with him. Moreover, now that she had broken through to the 5th meridian, her chances of winning were even higher. Naturally, she could not miss this opportunity. As the two forces continued to clash, the golden feather was gradually worn down, and the purplish gold scale armor on Zichen's fist also began to fade gradually. They were almost evenly matched. Seeing this, Dumpling hurriedly threw out another flame. Zichen looked up slightly, and a black feather also flew out. Bang! Dumpling's reinforcements were intercepted halfway. She was stunned for a moment, then an even stronger fighting spirit surged within her. So this was Zichen's real strength. That's great. Only then would the fight be interesting. However, just as she was about to continue attacking, she suddenly heard a subtle and strange sound. Ah! There seems to be a sound under the sand? Tuanzi was stunned and looked at the ground. Only then did she see that the sand seemed to be flowing towards the surroundings at an extraordinary speed. This is... She took a step forward curiously. Zichen's pupils shrank. Be careful. But it was too late. Just as Dumpling's foot landed, a vortex suddenly appeared below her. An extremely strange force surged up from below, entangling her feet and pulling her down. Ah! The next moment, Dumpling's figure disappeared from the spot. Zichen immediately retracted his hand. The force backfired, causing his chi and blood to surge. However, before he had time to think about this, he chased after Dumpling and jumped into the vortex. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were swallowed up one after another. Shui realized something and immediately jumped up to look down from above. Under the vortex there was a thick darkness. It was like an eye coldly looking at the world. Digression. 6 o'clock. Remember the mobile version of the website. Chapter 2101. In the heavenly square cauldron, the reddish gold flame was burning fiercely. A crimson elixir was floating quietly. The last line was slowly being drawn. Chu Liyue's forehead was constantly sweating, but before it could fall, it had been evaporated by the high temperature of the flame. Because she had used up too much energy, her lips were pale without a trace of blood. At this time the passage of time seemed to be particularly slow. The sky gradually darkened, and the cold wind swept from the depths of the desert, brushing past her body, and the chill seeped into her bones. In front of her was the hot fire, and behind her was the cold wind. Waves of weakness came from her body. Chu Liyue secretly bit the tip of her tongue, and a sweet and fishy taste spread between her lips and teeth. The sharp stabbing pain kept her extremely clear-headed. At this time, the last line on the elixir finally appeared completely. An extremely rich medicinal fragrance burst out from the cauldron. Chu Liyue slapped the cauldron with her palm. The soul-concentrating elixir flew up in an instant. The reddish-gold flame gradually peeled off, followed by the transparent karmic fire. When the last bit of fire dissipated, Chu Liyue jumped up, and her aura swept across, and put the soul-concentrating elixir into the jade box that had been prepared long ago. Bang! The jade box was closed and Chu Liyue fell back to the ground. She looked at the jade box in her hand, and could vaguely feel the fluctuations of the elixir inside. Soul-concentrating elixir. An elixir at the level of a grand doctor. The success of this elixir meant that she had officially stepped into the threshold of a grand doctor. The rich medicinal fragrance in the air did not dissipate for a long time. Chu Liyue's heart beat quickly, and the blood in her body seemed to be boiling. She raised the jade box in her hand, turned her head, and smiled brightly at Rong Xiao and Su Li, who were standing not far away. It's done. At this time the night was dark, and there were no stars or moon in the black velvet night sky. Beside her, in the transparent cauldron, a strong and bright flame was burning silently. The sparkling flame fell on her face, which was like a good porcelain jade. A pair of obsidian-like eyes were bright, and her red lips were raised in a bright smile. Congratulations you, Rong Xiao's thin scarlet lips were slightly raised, and there was undisguised appreciation in his eyes. Although he already knew that she would succeed, he still felt happy when he saw her happy expression. Su Li also gave him a thumbs up and sighed sincerely. You are truly amazing. Without any preparation, he directly used this opportunity to break through to the rank of Grand Physician. From the first time she tried to refine the soul-concentrating pill until now, it had only been over 10 days and she had only failed 4 times in between. If this news were to spread, it was unknown how many people would be envious, jealous, and hateful. Chu Liyue put away the cauldron. She thought for a moment and said, "Actually, Although the level of this soul-concentrating pill is quite high, it isn't too troublesome to refine. Being able to succeed this time was also due to some luck. Su Li was speechless. Isn't this troublesome? Even until now, she still couldn't remember the order in which the herbs were put in. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Yes. The soul-concentrating pill had a lot of herbs, but the refining technique was actually very simple. Among the prescriptions she had seen, it could only be ranked in the middle. Rong Xiu's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly, but he didn't speak. He had long noticed that Chu Luiyue's understanding of these prescriptions was a little skewed, and now it seemed that it was true. The soul-concentrating pill could be regarded as a very precious medicinal pill among the Grand Physician level. No matter from which aspect, it was definitely not simple. Even those experienced Grand Physicians, if it was their first time refining the soul-concentrating pill, they would rarely succeed in such a short period of time. But, now there was obviously no need to say these words to her. Chu Luiyue didn't notice the slight change in expression on Rong Xiu's face, and looked at Su Li with a smile. Mr. Su, with the soul-concentrating pill, it will be much easier to help you reconstruct your body. You just need to find a suitable skeleton of a 9th-stage martial artist and you can— Suddenly her expression changed and she quickly turned her head and looked into the depths of the desert. Almost at the same time, Rong Xiu's eyes also sharpened. Seeing this, Su Li's heart instantly surged with an ominous premonition. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue didn't speak, but her brows were tightly knitted. Just now she lost contact with Dumpling and Zichen. No matter how she called in her heart, she could no longer receive any news from the two at this time. Since she contracted with Dumpling and Zichen, this was the first time such a situation had happened. Chu Luiyue felt a chill on her back. After the magical beast and the human race contracted, they were connected to each other. Even if they were thousands of miles apart, they could still sense each other's existence. But now, it seemed that there was an extremely sharp knife that cut off the invisible connection between them. It was clearly fine just now. At this moment, Rong Xiu suddenly held her hand. His palm was warm and dry, and he held her hand tightly with strength and gentleness. Obviously, he had already sensed Chu Luiyue's nervousness. The ironing warmth surged from his palms, bringing with it a reassuring strength. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and said word by word, Dumpling and Zichen? I can't contact them. Rong Xiu's brows moved slightly, and he immediately understood Chu Luiyue's meaning. He gently squeezed her hand and said, Don't worry. This is the Red Moon Desert, they won't get lost. Chu Luiyue nodded. If they really couldn't find them, they could only ask Debao and the others for help. Swoosh. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air came from afar. The few of them looked up and saw a yellow and white figure running towards them at high speed. Wuxialover. When it came close, Chu Luiyue saw Xuanhuan's appearance clearly, and her expression changed. Its white and fluffy hair was covered with a layer of yellow sand. It looked dirty and some parts were even knotted. But this wasn't the most important thing. Because there were several black burn marks on Xuanhuan's butt. Xuanhuan, just as Chu Luiyue was about to ask, Xuanhuan quickly pounced over and bit the corner of her skirt. As it pulled, it let out a low whimper. Chu Luiyue suddenly realized something. Where are you taking me? Wait, your injury was caused by Dumpling? That aura was simply too familiar. Xuanhuan nodded frantically and was still pulling desperately. Rong Xiu suddenly said, It knows where Dumpling and Zichen are. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Really? Rong Xiu nodded slightly and looked at Xuanhuan. Just lead the way. Ow. Xuanhuan responded and turned to run forward. Chu Luiyue asked Su Li to return to the heavenly square cauldron, and then chased after Xuanhuan with Rong Xiu. The cold night wind brushed past their faces. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu ran at full speed, and the two figures quickly disappeared into the thick night. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2102. Xuanhuan was as fast as lightning. Although it was accidentally burned by Dumpling, it was only a flesh wound and was not serious. Under its lead, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu rushed into the depths of the desert. On the other side, Dugu Mabao and the other two had already realized that something was wrong when Dumpling and Zichen were swallowed by the vortex. Why isn't it over yet? Diwu Xianxia couldn't help but curse. First, they tried to attack you, seeing that it didn't work, they changed their target to Dumpling. Now even Zichen is implicated. Debao, you didn't attack just now? Dugu Mabao originally had its eyes closed, but after hearing that, it suddenly coughed a few times and blood flowed from its lips. Diwu Xianxia and Lan Zhao's expressions changed. They had already fought. Debao. You? Dugu Mabao slowly opened his eyes. A dark glint seemed to flash across his eyes before disappearing in an instant. He raised his hand and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his lips, and his eyes drooped slightly. The bright red color on the back of his hand deeply stimulated his eyes. I couldn't stop it. He had just gone through a dangerous month, and he was in a very weak state, so he couldn't use all his strength. As for the thing below, it was the opposite. In actual fact, ever since he noticed that the thing wanted to attack Chu Luiyue, he had been on tenterhooks and had maintained his guard up. When Dumpling was in danger, he immediately realized that something was wrong. Unfortunately, he still couldn't stop it. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao fell into silence. Dugu Mabao was the strongest among the three, and he was also the only one with a divine body. If even he said that, then, however, although I couldn't stop it, that thing is also injured. It should be obedient for a while. Dugu Mabao's words didn't make them feel at ease. That's Yuer's contracted fiend. Lan Xiao leaned against the wall and covered his face with one hand as he said slowly, "Don't worry. She won't let it go. If I had known earlier, I would have warned her. That thing has been plotting for a long time. Now that it finally has the chance, it naturally won't let it go." Dugu Mabao's expression was cold. "Don't forget, Dumpling is a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and she has the purest bloodline. Even if it didn't happen this time, there will be a next time." Diwu Zhangzi sighed. "That's true. But what should we do now? Lan Xiao and I are unable to leave this place in a short period of time. Only you can help you, Actually, Dugu Mabao's current situation wasn't optimistic. If it wasn't for him, Lan Xiao's life would have been in danger. He himself was also severely injured. Dugu Mabao slowly clenched his fists. Now that things have come to this, it's too late to stop them. Originally, he had planned to wait for her to break through to the Supreme God level. However, now that Dumpling and Zichen had disappeared together, she would not leave so easily. Furthermore, the agreement back then clearly stated that we were not to confront that thing head-on. Once one party takes the initiative to break this agreement, the other party will be able to kill them completely. Now is definitely not the time to fall out with them," he said. "Let's wait and see first." Under Shue's lead, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu quickly arrived at the place. When she saw the whirlpool above the desert, Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. This was almost exactly the same as the whirlpool that had appeared under her feet previously. It was just that this one looked bigger and deeper. Although they were still a short distance away from the whirlpool, Chu Luiyue could already feel a cold and sinister aura slowly spreading out from inside. An invisible pressure enveloped the entire area, making it almost impossible to breathe. A thought instantly appeared in Chu Luiyue's mind: this place is extremely dangerous. Shui stopped and whimpered softly. Chu Luiyue immediately understood what it meant. "You're saying that Dumpling and Zichen have both entered this place?" Shui nodded vigorously. Chu Luiyue took a few more steps forward. At this moment, she and Rong Xiu were standing in the air above the whirlpool. She instinctively felt that if she went any further, it would be extremely dangerous. However, she could still clearly see the situation below from here. A whirlpool had appeared above the vast and boundless desert. Sand constantly gushed out from below and surged in all directions. The entire whirlpool was slowly rotating in an anti-clockwise direction. The deepest part of the whirlpool was pitch black. For some reason, the moment Chu Luiyue looked down, she inexplicably felt as if she was being stared at by a pair of eyes. Cold, indifferent, evil, greedy, and crazy. Chu Luiyue's heart instantly felt as if it was being gripped tightly by something. At this moment, a familiar feeling came to her heart. Suddenly her eyes widened. She remembered now. This aura was exactly the same as the hand buried under Lingxiao College's mountain of wine. Peach Blossom Cove. The night was hazy. The pitch-black room was completely silent. Suddenly, Cini opened his eyes and quickly stood up. He picked up his clothes from the side and put them on before quickly walking out. The moment he opened the door, 13, who was sleeping next to him, heard the commotion. He also got up and poked his head out to look over. "Big brother, what's wrong?" Cini did not look at him. He said indifferently, "Go back and stay here." He hurriedly left as he spoke. 13 nodded and watched as Cini quickly left. He could not help but frown. Big brother seems to be in a hurry. What is he going to do? Cini walked out of the courtyard. He had just turned a corner when he bumped into someone. It was Xuanhuan. He blocked Cini's path. "Where are you going?" "Wonderful book house." Chapter 2103. Cini glanced at him. "Naturally, I'm going where I should go." Xuanhuan pursed his lips. "I'll go with you. Yi eyes flickered as he carefully sized up xuanhuan. He became alert. What do you know? Not many people knew that there was trouble on his master's side. Judging from xuanhuan's appearance, not only did he know something, he didn't come later than him. Xuanhuan was silent for a moment. I don't know. I just felt uneasy and happened to see you come out. Yi narrowed his eyes slightly as he scrutinized Xuanhuan with his long, narrow, and indifferent eyes. Xuanhuan met his gaze calmly. What he said just now was indeed true. For some reason he felt that something was going to happen tonight. He had planned to come out for a walk, but he happened to bump into Yi. Now Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiao weren't in Peach Blossom Cove. Everything was basically handed over to Yi. Something was clearly wrong for him to suddenly come out in such a hurry. There was no need to guess. It was definitely related to Chu Luiwei. After a brief standoff, Yi stepped forward and swept past Xuanhuan. You're not qualified. He was saying that Xuanhuan wasn't strong enough. His tone was as calm and cold as usual, but it was precisely because of this that his words were especially sharp. Xuanhuan stepped forward again and stopped him. His soft golden hair fell down, covering his eyes and brows. It was almost impossible to tell under the night sky. He enunciated each word clearly. How do you know that I'm not qualified? Yi couldn't be bothered with him. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he suddenly saw a totem faintly discernible between Xuanhuan's brows. He stopped in his tracks. A rare look of shock appeared on his usually expressionless face. Xuanhuan retracted his aura, and the totem quickly disappeared. Are you qualified now? Phoenix God Mountain. The Phoenix Shrine was brightly lit. The door of the temple was shut tight, and there was silence all around. Only Elder Yu was standing at the bottom of the steps in front of the door. He would look at the sky from time to time, then look at the Phoenix Shrine as if he was waiting for something. His face carried a hint of nervousness. After a long time, the door of the temple opened and a figure walked out. It was Yizhao, Patriarch. Elder Yu hurriedly went forward. How is it? Yizhao shook his head. Not yet. A look of disappointment appeared in Elder Yu's eyes, but it quickly dissipated as he consoled. This matter is extremely difficult to begin with. Our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan has existed for so many years, and there are very few who have been able to open the 8th meridian. But now that you've touched the threshold, you still have a very high chance of success. If it doesn't work this time, maybe next time? If anyone else was here, they would definitely be shocked to hear this. Because the 8th meridian belonged to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, a legendary level. In all these years, no more than 3 people in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had succeeded. Yizhao had spent most of his time in the Phoenix Shrine, and everyone in the clan thought that he was just cultivating as usual. After all, he spent most of his time here as well. Other than Elder Yu, no one knew that he was actually trying to open the 8th meridian. But the result was unsatisfactory, and after some effort he still failed. Hearing Elder Yu's words, Yizhao waved his hand carelessly. I know all this. As the Patriarch and also the strongest existence in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan closest to opening the 8th meridian, he knew better than anyone how difficult it was to cross this threshold. From the day he became the Patriarch until today, he had stayed in the 7th meridian for far too long. Actually, he didn't have much hope in this matter, but for some reason, he vaguely felt that he seemed to have grasped the knack of it, so he was tempted. Naturally, it would be best if he could succeed. If he couldn't, he would have a clear conscience even if he tried his best. At this level, what was needed was not just hard work, but also talent and opportunity. Therefore, Yizhao was very open-minded about this matter. Seeing Yizhao like this, Elder Yu also heaved a sigh of relief. But it would be a lie to say that he didn't regret it. If Yizhao could really open the 8th meridian, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan would be greatly encouraged. How is Dumpling recently? Yizhao asked. Elder Yu gathered his thoughts, and when he mentioned Dumpling, he couldn't help but smile. I heard that some time ago in the battle between Xuanhuan and Yi Wentao was defeated miserably. Dumpling also successfully opened her 5th meridian after that battle. This news had been spreading like wildfire in the entire Divine Ruins world recently, and it was hard not to know. However, Yizhao had been in seclusion recently, so he didn't know. When he heard this, Yizhao was both surprised and delighted. Really? So fast? It hadn't been long since Dumpling opened her 3rd meridian at Phoenix Godly Mountain. Yizhao originally thought that Dumpling would only be able to open her 5th meridian after a few more years. Unexpectedly, of course it's true. Xuanhuan is very powerful now and it complements Dumpling. They are both successful. Yi Zhao was full of smiles and he was rather emotional. Speaking of which, Ancestor really had a discerning eye. Back then we didn't agree with Dumpling continuing to follow Xuanhuan, but Ancestor insisted. Who would have thought that this day would come? After hearing about the recent events, Yu couldn't help but sigh. Dumpling following that woman was indeed the right choice. A faint smile appeared on Yi Zhao's usually cold and dignified face. Although it was just a flash, it was extremely rare. Ancestor has great foresight and Dumpling is also very smart. There are so many cultivators in the world, but it chose the best one at a glance. As expected of the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. His words were filled with pride. Elder Yu silently glanced at him, too embarrassed to remind him. Who was the one who didn't agree to Dumpling forming a contract with Xuanhuan and even threatened her? As Yi Zhao spoke, he changed the topic. However, Xuanhuan. Previously, she said that she would bring Dumpling back to visit when she has time. It's been so long, so why haven't we heard anything? Yu hurriedly said. Didn't they just occupy Peach Blossom Dock a while ago? They should be the busiest during this period of time. They will probably come back when everything is on the right track. Dumpling must miss us a lot, right? Speaking of this, Yi Zhao's expression softened. After pondering for a long time, he sighed softly. Dumpling has the purest bloodline and is extremely talented. She is also very smart. Opening the 8th meridian is extremely difficult for the rest of the clan, but it might be within reach for her. She might even be able to reach the peak in the future. Suddenly his expression changed. Oh no. Something happened to Dumpling. Wonderful bookhouse. I didn't expect to see this scene again here, Chu Luiyue muttered softly. She still had a deep impression of the hand at the bottom of the myriad wine mountain. The mysterious existence under the vortex should be from the same sect as that hand, but there were some differences. She had wondered more than once what kind of existence could have such a terrifying pressure with just a hand. But she never had an answer. And now this, she slowly clenched her fists. After experiencing that calamity, she knew very well that it was very difficult to fight against it with her own strength. If it wasn't for Debao's help at that time, thinking of this, her frown deepened. Along the way she had summoned Debao many times, but she never got a response. Now she didn't know how Debao and the other two were doing. If Debao had suppressed the hand in Lingxiao College back then, what about this? Chu Luiyue wasn't sure. An indescribable tension and irritation slowly surged from the bottom of her heart. She couldn't help but take a step forward. Suddenly, a cold and deep voice sounded in her ear. Are you? Chu Luiyue suddenly came back to her senses and looked at Rongxiu. In the depths of his deep eyes she could see her tiny figure. And his hand was tightly holding her wrist. Rongxiu's sword-like eyebrows furrowed slightly. What were you thinking just now? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and realized that she had unconsciously taken a step forward. If Rongxiu hadn't held her back, she probably would have gone straight for the vortex. Her back was suddenly drenched in cold sweat. Just a moment ago she was clearly thinking that this place was extremely dangerous and shouldn't be easily approached. The next moment she actually walked forward uncontrollably. Even someone as vigilant as her was lost for a moment and almost made a mistake. Rongxiu held her hand tightly. Step back. I'll go down and take a look. No. Chu Luiyue's first reaction was to refuse. On the one hand, the vortex was full of unknown dangers. On the other hand, Dumpling and Zichen were both her contracted magical beasts. Even if someone had to go down and check it out, it should be her. In all aspects she was the most suitable person. Rongxiu stepped forward and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. Be good and listen to me. His words were gentle, but his tone was firm. Chu Luiyue looked up in surprise as confusion flashed across her eyes. Rongxiu's attitude towards this matter had always been very firm. Previously, when they were at Lingxiao College, he wouldn't let her go no matter what. It was the same this time. Although it was dangerous, they had gone through life and death together more than once. Rongxiu didn't seem to have such a reaction when they encountered other situations in the past. Just as she was thinking, a fierce wind suddenly blew in the desert. Whoosh, the wind whistled and a thin layer of frost quickly condensed on the sand dunes. The surrounding temperature dropped rapidly and the wind was bitterly cold. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The nights in the Red Moon Desert were always extremely cold. But this time it seemed to be a little different. Boom. Suddenly, a roar came from the sky. Chu Luiyue immediately looked up and saw a round moon in the originally dark night sky. It was faintly discernible among the layers of dark clouds. The faint moonlight shrouded the entire Red Moon Desert as if it was covered with a layer of white gauze. Then, a sharp and strange sound suddenly came from under the desert. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She immediately looked down. An eye suddenly opened. It stared at her from the abyss. Wonderful bookhouse. Chapter 2105. It was indeed an eye. Chu Liyue was shocked. Previously she was only guessing. However, at this moment she clearly saw that huge eye. It was scarlet, bloody and crazy. As if it had been suppressed for thousands of years, it carried deep resentment and coldness. Chu Liyue stared at it in a daze, and her mind went blank for a moment. Suddenly, a warm and strong hand covered her eyes, blocking everything in front of her. At the same time she leaned back and fell into a broad and tough chest. A faint, cold fragrance permeated the air and enveloped her entire body, soothing her mind and calming her down. Rongxiu. Chu Liyue covered Rongxiu's hand with both hands and muttered in a low voice. Did you see it? Rongxiu grunted, turned her around and hugged her tightly in his arms. Don't worry, I'm here. Chu Liyue leaned in his arms, her forehead on his chest, and her vision was pitch black. She could clearly hear his strong heartbeat. She nodded, but her heart was still surging with waves. That eye was really powerful. It could bewitch people and confuse their minds without batting an eyelid. She thought that she was an extremely resilient person, but she almost fell for it because of her carelessness just now. If not for Rongxiu, she was afraid that eye and the hand under the wine mountain belong to the same person, don't they? She asked softly. Rongxiu nodded, one arm wrapped around her slender waist, and his chin rubbed the top of her head a few times. Her hair was soft and smooth, and it also carried the unique cold peach blossom fragrance on her body. Rongxiu looked down. Her hair was tied up in a simple bun, and she didn't wear any extra hairpins. Only the peach blossom hairpin shone faintly in her hair. She had been wearing it ever since she got married. Rongxiu retracted his gaze and looked at the vortex below. It should be in existence above her eminence. Chu Liyue didn't say anything. In fact, she had already guessed this. It wasn't that she hadn't seen her eminence before. Even the best of them, Yi Wentao, had been defeated by her. However, the mysterious and powerful existence suppressed below was much more powerful than her eminence. And this was only a part of the divine body. Rongxiu patted her shoulder gently and leaned over to her ear. His voice was low and reassuring. Wait for me. As he spoke, he loosened his arm. At the same time, a golden flame flew out from his palm. In the blink of an eye, the fire formed a barrier around Chu Liyue's body, completely trapping her in it. With a light tap of his slender and fair finger, the golden barrier retreated quite a distance. Until he was sure that she was safe, Rongxiu looked at the vortex again. The patience and gentleness on his face completely disappeared at this moment. A layer of frost quickly climbed up his eyebrows. His deep and unfathomable eyes were even colder and more dignified. He leaped up, and in the next moment he was directly above the vortex. An astonishing force came from below, as if it was going to devour him. Rongxiu's clothes fluttered in the strong wind. The hazy moonlight and the dark night blended together. Dressed in white, he stood in the air, sacred and noble like a banished immortal. However, his body was cold and filled with murderous intent. From afar he looked more like a killing god who had walked out of hell. Chu Liyue stared at him, and for a moment she was in a daze. This Rongxiu was obviously very familiar to her, but there seemed to be some subtle changes and it was a little unfamiliar. In fact, this wasn't the first time she had seen such a scene, and she had felt this way before. She remembered very clearly that when the unparalleled palace chased after Rongxiu and forced him to make a move, he seemed to be like this. It was also at that time that she first knew about Rongxiu's identity as the Holy Sun. At that time she had not recovered her memories, but she had a deep impression of that scene. In the past she did not pay too much attention to it. She only thought that Rongxiu would act like this when he wanted to kill someone. He had always been decisive, cold and ruthless in killing. Otherwise he would not have been able to obtain the position of the Holy Sun in the Yuntian Tower, nor would he have been able to establish his reputation in the Divine Ruins world, much less reach where he was today. But for some reason Chu Liyue felt a strange feeling in her heart as she looked at him. Suddenly her heart skipped a beat. Rongxiu's current expression was very similar to their reflection in the mirror in front of the Peach Blossom Cove's enchantment. Rongxiu flicked his wrist, and the golden flame quickly turned into a long whip. If one looked closely they would be able to see the sharp scales and barbs on the whip. Crack! Rongxiu lashed out with the whip. The sound of the whip breaking through the air resounded through the world and spread far and wide. At the same time, the whirlpool suddenly stopped spinning. A sharp and shrill sound came out from it. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. This sound was clearly clearer than the previous one, and it was even more chilling. Immediately after, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth seemed to be attracted by something and rushed over. The ground started to shake as if something was about to rush out from below. A cluster of black flames rose from Rongxio's eyes. His eyes were cold as he waved his hand again. Crack! Several golden rays flew out quickly and lay in the middle of the whirlpool. These golden rays quickly intertwined and formed a huge net, completely enveloping the whirlpool. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2106. The screeching stopped for a moment, and the place fell into a strange silence. However, Chu Liyue's heart still felt like it was being gripped tightly by something. Because the surrounding energy of heaven and earth was still rushing towards this place. The abundant energy was like a surging river, pouring down towards the vortex. It was as if there was something in the depths of the vortex that was crazily devouring everything. The wind whistled. Chu Liyue could still clearly see the scene in front of her through the faint golden barrier in front of her. The ground trembled and the yellow sand flowed. The rustling sound kept echoing in her ears. Suddenly the eye blinked. Boom! The giant golden net dissipated with a loud bang. The violent energy scattered in all directions. Swoosh! A black rope suddenly flew out from below, heading straight for Chu Liyue. Seeing this, Rongxio's eyes turned cold, and the golden whip in his hand turned into a ball of fire again. Then he actually crushed it with his bare hands. Bang! Following this loud bang, the ball of fire turned into countless streams of light, and then quickly formed a giant Shen formation in front of Rongxio. In the blink of an eye, the incomparably complicated patterns were outlined. As for the black chain, it was also blocked by the Shen formation. As if it had sensed danger, the chain quickly retreated, and disappeared into the vortex again. Chu Liyue widened her eyes in shock. So fast. It was definitely not easy to execute such a complicated Shen formation. If it was her, she probably wouldn't even be able to complete it. Suddenly her gaze fixed. This Shen formation looked very familiar. Suddenly a thought flashed in her mind. This was the Shen formation that was used to suppress the Thousand Wine Mountain, the Sky Shuttle formation. How did Rongxio execute it? In a flash, the last stream of light finally converged on it. The complete and complicated Shen formation hung in the night sky, rotating quietly and shining brilliantly. An indescribable pressure and aura spread from it. Even Chu Liyue, who was standing far away and separated by a layer of barrier, felt a little stuffy. She gasped in shock. Rongxio was actually able to use the formation in such a short time. Could it be that he had already broken through to the Great Grandmaster realm? Without waiting for Chu Liyue to ask in detail, Rongxio's figure moved. He leaped up and stepped on the huge golden Shen formation. Boom! Driven by this power, the formation began to descend. This speed seemed slow, but wherever the profound formation passed, large swathes of space would collapse one after another. Everything was quickly destroyed as if it was nothing more than rotten wood. The distance between the Shen formation and the vortex was constantly shortening, and the power of both sides had also started to crazily slaughter each other. However, the profound formation still gradually gained the upper hand and destroyed the power below bit by bit. Finally, the golden array landed on the ground and sealed off the vortex. The surrounding heaven and earth energy no longer surged towards the center, dissipating separately. That shrill shriek was quickly extinguished as well. The yellow sand that had surged out earlier was now flowing back. Chu Liyue stood in the air and saw everything. She was almost in awe. It had only been a short while, but the situation had taken a 180-degree turn. And all of this was because of Rongxio. Her gaze turned slightly and landed on Rongxio. He stood in midair. After a fierce battle, there wasn't even a speck of dirt on his snow-white robe. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, it would have been hard to believe that he could use the Sky Shuttle formation so easily. One had to know that even the entire Lingxiao College's elders were helpless when they joined forces. If not for Debao's help, Chu Liyue would definitely not have succeeded. Furthermore, she was only repairing the Sky Shuttle formation at that time. Just this alone almost cost her half her life. And now, Rongxio completely relied on his own strength to directly use it. A doubt once again welled up in Chu Liyue's heart. How strong was Rongxio? She originally thought that after this period of experience she should be able to compete with Rongxio. But once the Sky Shuttle formation was used, she understood that there was still a considerable gap between them. She had no idea when he had broken through, and there were no signs at all. As if sensing Chu Liyue's gaze, Rongxiu suddenly turned his head and looked over. A ball of black flame flashed in his eyes. However, because there was a distance between the two of them and Chu Liyue was blocked by the golden barrier in front of her, she could not see this point. Rongxiu looked back. Under the suppression of the sky shuttle formation, the whirlpool was gradually shrinking, and the movement below was also fading away little by little. His figure moved and he came in front of Chu Liyue. He lifted his wrist slightly, and the golden barrier dissipated. You? Chu Liyue looked at him with a complicated expression, and for a moment she did not know what to say. Seeing the shock in her eyes, Rongxiu's thoughts moved slightly, but his expression was normal. What's wrong? Chu Liyue opened her mouth and pointed downwards. That's the sky shuttle formation? Rongxiu nodded. Yes. When did you learn it? Also, this level of Shen formation, how did you? Rongxiu's thin lips curved slightly and he smiled. When you were repairing the sky shuttle formation, I looked at it for a while. Chu Liyue stared at him in disbelief. This meant that he only looked at it once that day and he learned it? But before it was repaired, the sky shuttle formation was incomplete. After it was repaired, the sky shuttle formation was quickly used to suppress the xuanhuan mountain. The complete sky shuttle formation did not appear for long. It's enough. Rongxiu's voice was as low and calm as usual, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Chu Liyue choked. Looking at Rongxiu's calm appearance, she was speechless for a moment. She now vaguely understood how others felt when they looked at her. It was really infuriating to compare oneself to others. At this moment, a strange sound came from below. Chu Liyue and Rongxiu looked up at the same time, and saw that the vortex suddenly began to shrink at an astonishing speed. The surrounding yellow sand kept surging in, as if it was going to be completely flattened. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly sank. Dumpling and Zichen are still down there. She originally thought that Rongxiu would force the other party to send Dumpling and Zichen out, but she never expected the other party to be so stubborn. Rongxiu's expression turned cold, and he immediately shouted in a deep voice. Explode. Boom. Boom. The power of the sky shuttle formation instantly surged to the center, then condensed into a ball of flame and suddenly exploded. Suddenly the ground shook violently. Yellow sand flew everywhere. A huge pit had appeared beneath the sky shuttle array. It was empty inside. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2107. Chu Liyue had a bad feeling. Almost at the same time, Rongxiu attacked again. On the sky shuttle array, several fireballs exploded one after another. Boom, boom, boom. With several earth-shattering explosions, a deep gully appeared in the vast desert. However, under the yellow sand there was still yellow sand. Other than that, there was nothing. Rongxiu frowned. Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized that something was wrong. Dumpling and Zichen had probably been swept away by the other party. She moved her feet and went straight down to the gully. Dumpling. Zichen. She shouted as she searched. Gradually, her body was enveloped by a chill. The connection between them and her had been forcefully cut off. She couldn't sense their existence at all. The most important thing was, that strange and gloomy aura had disappeared without a trace. It was as if the eye in the vortex abyss had never appeared. She stood in the deep gully. Because the flow had stopped, the yellow sand under her feet was covered with frost again. Other than that, there was nothing in front or behind her. She clenched her fists and muttered in a low voice, "It ran away just like that." Rongxiu quickly rushed over and frowned. After checking back and forth a few times, he finally said, "It didn't run away. It just hid." Chu Liyue turned to look at him. "Really?" Rongxiu nodded. Although the sky shuttle array didn't completely kill it, it was still seriously injured. Under such circumstances, it couldn't have escaped. Besides, he paused. Besides, it's very likely that it has been here for a long time. It won't leave so easily. Chu Liyue hesitated at first, but then she remembered the hand at the foot of Lingxiao College's mountain of wine and immediately believed it. What Rongxiu said was indeed very likely. That thing was very strange. It had probably been suppressed for many years. But, if that's really the case, why did Debao and the others ignore it and allow it to exist? Rongxiu glanced at her darkly. "Did you forget that the thing at the foot of the xuanhuan mountain is the same?" Chu Liyue fell silent. "That's right. If Debao and the others could deal with that thing directly, they would definitely not be merciful. But they didn't. I wonder if there are other difficulties. Moreover, Debao and the others had not given any response since Dumpling's disappearance. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue turned and left. I want to see Debao and the others. In this Crimson Moon Desert, the three of them were practically existences that ruled over everything. Chu Luiyue did not believe that they were unaware of this. No matter what reason they had for not intervening, she had to personally ask them. It would be best if they could help. They couldn't. Even if she had to flip the entire Crimson Moon Desert over, she would find Dumpling and Ziqin. Rong Xiu's lips moved slightly, but he hesitated. He knew her temperament the best. She would never give up easily when she planned to do something. Moreover, everything that happened today had really crossed her bottom line. He stepped forward. I'll be with you. She's coming. She's coming. Diwu Zhangzi was anxious. Dumpling and Ziqin are missing. How are we going to explain this? Debao, say something. Dugu Mabao sat cross-legged with no expression on his face. Hearing this, he only frowned slightly and said coldly, noisy. Diwu Zhangzi pointed at his nose in disbelief. I'm noisy? Wasn't I forced to do this? Debao, get it straight. What time is it now? You, is here to ask for an explanation. What are you going to do? You pretended to be dead before. You can't be pretending to be dead now, right? Hey. You're not really going to pretend that nothing happened, are you? How can that girl be dealt with so easily? Lan Xiao, who was leaning against the wall, said impatiently, Diwu, can you calm down? You're really noisy. Diwu Zhangzi took a deep breath. You. Lan Xiao, you're on the same side as Debao now? Lan Xiao sneered and turned over. I can't be bothered. But he's not anxious, so why are you so anxious? Even if you is looking for trouble, it should be his turn first, right? Dugu Mabao was the only one with a divine body among the three of them. Lan Xiao crossed his legs. Even if the sky falls, he should be the first to hold it up. Although he's only a little bit now, it doesn't matter. We're underground. Dugu Mabao glared daggers at him. Lan Xiao didn't care. He was telling the truth. So what? Diwu Zhangzi couldn't be bothered with the two of them. After so many years, they were still as unreliable as ever. Spent a lot of effort on Dumpling and Ziqin along the way and doted on them like treasures. Now that something has happened, if she makes a scene, no one can escape. Diwu Zhangzi was so angry that he sat down. Let's see what you're going to do. As soon as he said that, a familiar voice sounded. Debao. It was Chu Luiyue. Dugu Mabao's expression changed slightly. Debao. I have something to ask you. If it's convenient, can you meet me? Beside the lake, Chu Luiyue looked at the calm lake in front of her and knitted her brows. You. Before he could finish, Dugu Mabao appeared in front of him again. Speak. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. You know what happened just now? Dugu Mabao nodded. Yes. Chu Luiyue immediately said. Then can you help? No. Dugu Mabao interrupted him. The three of us will definitely not fight him head-on. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2108. In that case, the three of them did know about the existence of the eye underground. Why? Chu Luiyue took a step forward and asked with a frown. Dugu Mabao looked at her indifferently. There's no reason. But back then at Lingxiao Academy, you were the one who did it? Dugu Mabao said firmly. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Only then did she remember that although Debao helped secretly at that time, he did not show up from the beginning to the end. In the Divine Ruins world, he seemed to be unwilling to do anything publicly. He even refused to admit this matter. Her mind raced and then she asked, Then, the whereabouts of Dumpling and Ziqin, they're still here. Dugu Mabao raised his chin and his expression was slightly serious. All I can tell you is that it can't leave the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. That's right. Of course this was compared to Debao and the other two. Could it be, was it related to that thing that trapped them here? Whether or not you can find Dumpling and Ziqin depends on you. As Dugu Mabao spoke, he turned around and was about to leave. After taking a step, he suddenly stopped. I'll be in seclusion during this period of time. Diwu and Lan Xiao will be busy with the divine body and won't come out much. Everything you can do as you see fit. With that he walked forward. The lake water parted and his figure quickly disappeared. A moment later the lake water returned to calm. A gentle breeze blew, only causing faint ripples. Chu Luiyue stood in place for a long time. At this time the sky was about to brighten, and a ray of white appeared on the horizon. From afar, the faint layer of frost that had condensed during the night was quietly melting. Quiet and desolate. Rong Xiu walked over, stood beside her and held her hand. Chu Luiyue turned around and said, It seems that I can only find them myself. I'll go with you. Fortunately, it won't leave the Red Moon Desert. This is much better than expected. Chu Luiyue heaved a long sigh of relief. Rong Xiu glanced at the surface of the lake, which was gradually calming down. Not angry? Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly as she shook her head. How could that be? Actually, De Bao's refusal to help was within her expectations. So when she heard his answer, she was not surprised or dissatisfied. I know how they treat me. Clearly there was another reason for this. Chu Luiyue had no idea who had trapped De Bao and the other two in the Red Moon Desert. But now she had a vague feeling that she had discovered something. The hand under the Thousand Wine Mountain and the eye under the Red Moon Desert. Obviously, it was related to this. If we can find Dumpling and Zichen, we might be able to help them. Chu Luiyue didn't finish his sentence. She turned around and looked at the vast desert behind her. Where exactly was that eye hidden? Dugu Mabao returned to the dark and cramped cage. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao looked over. Rong Xiu has already asked what you wanted to ask. Dugu Mabao said calmly. You heard Yuer's answer. From the beginning, he was not worried that she would find trouble with them because of this matter. Because she had always been extremely smart. Diwu Zhangzi sighed with a complicated expression and said emotionally, I really didn't dote on her for nothing. Dumpling and Zichen were very important to her. Now that they were suddenly missing, one could imagine the worry and anxiety in her heart. In comparison, Dugu Mabao's words seemed a little unreasonable. But fortunately, that girl was very open-minded about these things. The Red Moon Desert won't be peaceful for a period of time. I've already told her that we won't interfere. You mean no matter what happens in the future we'll just watch from here? Lan Xiao asked. Dugu Mabao looked at him expressionlessly. Other than watching, what else can you do now? In his current state, even if it was the day of the Red Moon, he wouldn't have the strength to go out. Lan Xiao choked. He wanted to defend himself, but Dugu Mabao was speaking the truth. He really couldn't think of anything to refute him. In the end he could only harumph fiercely. When my divine body is reconstructed, I'll come out and fight with you. Dugu Mabao sat down. With a move of his palm, a xian formation appeared in front of him. This xian formation was very different from ordinary xian formations. There was an unusually bright light spot on it. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao were stunned when they saw his actions. Big Bao, what are you doing? Diwu Zhangzi subconsciously straightened his body. His expression was solemn as he lowered his voice and asked. Dugu Mabao said calmly, Of course I'm opening the gate realm. You're crazy. Lan Xiao suddenly sat up. Because of the shock, his half-recovered face looked a little ferocious. The Red Moon Desert and the Divine Ruins world are connected by a door realm. That door realm is also an extremely secret place. You're opening the door realm now to attract those people from the Divine Ruins world? Dugu Mabao said, As long as we don't go out, they have no reason to come in. Lan Xiao choked. Although that was the case, these door realms had never been opened for many years. Even when they sent you to the Divine Ruins world, they took a detour and went through Peach Blossom Cove. But now, you want to attract other people from the Divine Ruins world? Diwu Zhangzi suddenly realized something and asked in surprise. Dugu Mabao nodded. Of course she's not a match for that thing alone. Even if Rong Xiu is here, it won't be easy to deal with it. If more people come to help, maybe we'll have a better chance of winning. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao looked at each other and were silent for a long time. Dugu Mabao's actions were equivalent to directly exposing them to danger. And all of this was for Yuer. Although he said that he wasn't willing to help, he actually made such a decision secretly. Since you've already decided, we naturally have no objections. Diwu Zhangzi nodded and sighed again. I only hope that all these things can be resolved before the next dangerous month. Lan Xiao suddenly turned around and closed his eyes. A ball of fire jumped in his palm. Diwu Zhangzi asked curiously, Lan Xiao, what are you doing? Lan Xiao didn't even open his eyes and only snorted softly. Naturally, I'm reconstructing the divine body. Dugu Mabao isn't the only one who can help you. This time we have to succeed no matter what. Dugu Mabao glanced at him, then quickly retracted his gaze and looked at the xian formation in front of him. For a long time this door realm had never been opened. But this time he couldn't care so much. A faint glow shone on his face, making his purple eyes look even more demonic. Then he raised his hand and lightly tapped on the xian formation. Bang! A faint sound came from the xian formation. That spot of light quickly spread out. At the same time the Divine Ruins world shook. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2109. Yi Zhao, who had just arrived outside the Yuntian Tower, was shocked. He quickly turned his head and looked in the direction of the commotion. In the distant horizon, a ripple suddenly appeared on the curtain of light that fell from the sky. As the ripple moved, the energy between heaven and earth was greatly affected and surged along with it. Whoosh, a sound like a surging tide entered one's ears and shook one's heart. Yi Zhao's eyes flashed with deep shock. He said in disbelief, "This is..." Suddenly the void not far away fluctuated and a figure walked out of it. Yi Zhao immediately looked at the person warily. When he saw the other party's face clearly, his expression froze. Mao Jin rushed over and did not expect to meet an acquaintance. The two looked at each other for a moment, and the atmosphere was a little strange. The relationship between the two ancient divine beasts, the crimson gold celestial phoenix and the great phoenix dragon, had always been very subtle. In all aspects, these two families were on equal footing. However, they were extremely proud in their bones, and there were all kinds of comparisons between them both overtly and covertly. However, because Chu Luiyue had contracted Dumpling and Ziqin respectively, these two families were once again involved. Therefore it was somewhat awkward to meet now. However, Mao Jin was strong and was the first to react. He greeted with a smile. "Clan leader Yi Zhao, I didn't expect to meet you here. What a coincidence." Yi Zhao looked at him expressionlessly and said bluntly, "It's a coincidence. We're both here to look for someone in the Yuntian Tower." Mao Jin was a little surprised that his purpose was exposed. Then he realized that something was wrong. His expression turned serious. Could it be? The two looked at each other again. They were powerful beings who had lived for thousands of years. Moreover, these two were very shrewd. Therefore they quickly understood something with just one look. Mao Jin frowned and asked, "To be honest, I've cut off contact with Ziqin." Yi Zhao paused. Same for Dumpling. The two of them fell silent, and the air seemed to have frozen at this moment. If it was only Dumpling or Ziqin who had temporarily lost contact with them, it would be fine. But now the two of them had disappeared together. This made people think more about it. Mao Jin immediately said, "Let's go to the Yuntian Tower and ask." Just as he was about to make his move, a strange sound echoed from the distance. "Hula?" He was taken aback and turned his head to look. Only then did he see that there were two wrinkles on the light screen in the distance. And that sound just now was the surging energy of heaven and earth. "How?" Mao Jin was stunned for a moment. Yi Zhao said in a deep voice, "As you can see, another gate realm has opened." "How is this possible?" Mao Jin subconsciously retorted. The gate realm of the divine ruins realm appeared together with the curtain of light tens of thousands of years ago. It was not changed by any external force. Why is there an extra one now? The first-rate families and clans in the divine ruins realm more or less controlled a certain number of gate realms. And this was also a symbol of their status. Only those with real power and combat strength could occupy the gate realms and be responsible for guarding them. However, the gate realms were not opened by these people. They had existed since the birth of heaven and earth. Yi Zhao said, "You and I both saw it with our own eyes. No matter how impossible it is, it has already happened." Mao Jin looked over in a daze. In the distance, the screen of light was rippling like the surface of water being blown by the wind. It was indeed forming a new world of gates. Suddenly, something flashed through his mind. Rumor has it that the mysterious existence above the God realm can completely control a gate realm. Could it be? But in the divine ruins realm, there had not been such an expert for tens of thousands of years. What exactly was going on now? Yi Zhao clenched his hands behind his back and said word by word, "This shocking change will be known by the entire divine ruins realm." The commotion was too big. No matter who it was, as long as they looked up, they would immediately see this scene. Something is wrong with this gate realm. Mao Jin frowned. Dumpling and Ziqin had suddenly lost contact with them, and now something like this had happened one after another. Although these two matters seemed to be unrelated on the surface, he had an intuition in his heart that there must be some kind of connection between these two matters. Yi Zhao did not say anything. Actually, he had the same idea as Mao Jin. With such a sudden occurrence, the entire divine ruins realm would probably be in chaos. At this moment, the barrier of the Yuntian Tower opened behind the two of them, and a person walked out. The two of them turned around and saw that it was 36 respected Elder Ming. 36 respected Elder Ming bowed politely to the two of them. "I didn't know that the two of you would be here. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you." Although his seniority was very high in front of these two people, he was still far from being able to compare to them. 36 respected Elder Ming asked while muttering in his heart. I wonder what day it is today, but the two of them actually came together. After receiving the news, he immediately rushed over, afraid that he would neglect them. Mao Zhen went straight to the point. Where are Rong Xiao and you are now? 36 respected Elder Ming was stunned. As expected, they were here for the two of them. But looking at Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao's expressions, something seemed wrong. He hesitated for a moment and said, His Highness and Her Highness have left for some time. Chapter 21:10. Sigh. 36 respected Elder Ming did not expect the two of them to leave just like that. Just as he shouted, the two of them were already far away. He opened his mouth and swallowed the rest of his words. What were they doing? Who didn't know that the relationship between these two ancient divine beast tribes had always been in a delicate balance? Both sides rarely appeared together, let alone the tribe leader. The last time they came together, it was because of Rong Xiao and Chu Liyue's wedding. What was the reason this time? Furthermore, he had actually left after asking a single question. 36 respected Elder Ming was puzzled when he suddenly saw a strange scene in the sky from the corner of his eye. He took a closer look and was instantly stunned. When he realized what had happened, he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. A new gate realm has appeared? And that was also the direction Yi Zhao and Zi Zhen had headed in. 36 respected Elder Ming turned around without hesitation. The Divine Ruins world was about to change. It was not just Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen. When the strange ripples appeared on the light screen in the sky, countless people in the Divine Ruins world were shocked. Countless cultivators rushed over from all directions without hesitation. A new gate realm had suddenly opened. It was definitely not for no reason. This time they did not just want to seize the gate realm. They also wanted to see what was hidden behind this matter. For a time, the entire Divine Ruins world was shaken. Red Moon Desert. The sun was high in the sky. Chu Liyue looked up. At this moment, she was extremely glad that she had already condensed a divine body. Even if she stayed here day and night, it would not be too torturous. The only thing that troubled her was that they had already searched here for 3 days, but they still could not find any traces of Dumpling and Zichen. Previously, she could still vaguely sense a familiar aura at the vortex. Now there were no clues at all. The Red Moon Desert was vast. Finding them was like finding a needle in a haystack. Not to mention there was that strange eye causing trouble. This made it even more difficult for them to find them. She stopped in her tracks. If we continue to search like this, I'm afraid there won't be any progress. After that day, the eye disappeared without a trace and never appeared again. Just as De Bao had said, this was that thing's territory. It was more familiar with this place, so it naturally had the upper hand. If the other party did not take the initiative to appear, they did not know how long it would take for them to find him. Moreover, he might not succeed. Rong Xiao frowned. There's been no movement from the Sky Shuttle formation. After Dumpling and Zichen disappeared, Rong Xiao decided to leave the Sky Shuttle array behind, even though he couldn't find them. Even now, the ravine seemed to have returned to normal, but in reality, the Sky Shuttle formation was buried under the sand. Once there were any fluctuations, he would immediately sense it. Chu Liyue sighed. That thing is very cunning. It will definitely not appear in the near future. She narrowed her eyes and fell into deep thought. Rong Xiao, who do you think that thing's target is? Rong Xiao raised his eyes slightly and looked at her quietly. What do you mean? I have a feeling that it's not targeting Dumpling and Zichen. Its real target seems to be me. Chu Liyue rested her chin on one hand, frowned, and gently stroked her chin. Why do you suddenly have such a thought? Rong Xiao asked faintly. Chu Liyue shook her head. It's not all of a sudden. In fact, she had vaguely sensed this from the moment she saw the eye. Previously at Lingxiao College, she rushed into the spring of Thousand Wine Mountain and accidentally touched the seal on that hand, which led to everything that happened later. Even though everything had calmed down, the scene from that day still vividly appeared in her mind. When she saw the eye, she clearly felt that she was being targeted. At the very beginning, that strange vortex had indeed appeared under her feet. She had jumped several times in the middle, but she could not get rid of it. In the end, Rong Xiao had to intervene to solve it. However, not long after, Dumpling and Zichen were in trouble. They were her contracted magical beasts, so it was normal for them to be implicated. Chu Liyue fell into deep thought. Was it because of that hand, or was it because she had something on her that the other party wanted? Suddenly, there was the sound of something piercing through the air. Chu Liyue and Rong Xiao turned around simultaneously and saw two figures running towards them, one after the other. They were extremely fast and arrived in front of the two in the blink of an eye. You are indeed here. Chu Luiyue looked at the two people who suddenly appeared in front of her with a look of surprise. Senior Yizhao, Senior Mao Zhen? Why are you and together? As soon as she asked the question, she immediately realized something. Are you here because of Dumpling and Ziqin? Yizhao nodded and immediately asked. The connection between me and Tuanzi was suddenly broken. Do you know what happened? Chu Luiyue's heart sank. She originally thought that Dumpling had just lost contact with her, but who knew? This was troublesome. To tell you the truth, seniors, I can't get in touch with the two of them right now. How is that possible? Yizhao's expression froze. Chu Luiyue was contracted to them. How could this happen? Chu Luiyue immediately explained the situation briefly. That's what happened. For the past few days, Rongxiu and I have been constantly looking for them, but... Yizhao's face completely darkened. Mao Zhen suddenly asked. Where are we? Red Moon Desert, Chu Luiyue said. It's also the territory of the Tianling dynasty. Mao Zhen shook her head and stared intently behind Chu Luiyue. No. Look behind you. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:11. Chu Luiyue turned around and was immediately shocked. At the end of the vast desert, a palace had appeared at some point in time. The palace was shrouded in a layer of faint white mist and could not be seen clearly. One could only barely make out a rough outline, but its specific appearance could not be distinguished. In front of the palace, a stone door stood tall and a plaque hung above it. Unfortunately, the words on it were covered by the white mist and could not be seen. However, even so, one could still feel its indescribable dignity and majesty. It stood quietly between heaven and earth, like a creeping giant beast, waiting to ambush and devour everything at any time. Chu Luiyue stared intently. For a moment, she was actually unable to tell whether it was an illusory shadow or a real existence. But she and Rongxiu clearly did not see anything just now. Why did this strange palace suddenly appear after Yizhao and Mao Zhen arrived? This is, Mao Zhen asked, why would such a palace appear in the Red Moon Desert? Chu Luiyue was momentarily speechless and did not know how to answer. The Red Moon Desert was indeed the territory of the Tianling dynasty. Back then, in order to pacify the Great Desolate Swamp, she had personally led an army here and fought several bitter battles. As for the Red Moon Desert, she had been here more than once. In total, the time she had spent here could not be considered short. But even so, she had never seen such a situation. After a moment, she shook her head. I don't know either. Mao Zhen was somewhat surprised. He originally thought that Chu Luiyue should be quite familiar with this place. But judging from her reaction, it was clearly her first time seeing this palace. Then, he hesitated and asked, Do you know how the two of us got here? Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment. This question. With Yizhao and Mao Zhen's strength, wouldn't it be a simple matter to come here? As if seeing through her thoughts, Mao Zhen laughed bitterly and said, It seems that you still don't know that a new door has appeared in the Divine Ruins world. Chu Luiyue reacted for a while before he understood what he meant. His eyes widened in surprise. However, what Mao Zhen said next shocked her even more. The two of us came from that gate realm. What? Chu Luiyue almost suspected that he had misheard. You mean, you and Senior Yizhao came here directly after crossing the Dao Gate realm? Mao Zhen nodded. Not bad. Chu Luiyue subconsciously looked at Yizhao. Although the latter did not say anything, his expression said it all. If both of them said the same thing, then everything would be confirmed. Chu Luiyue's lips moved slightly, but his heart was in turmoil. She knew that she could go to the Divine Ruins world from the Red Moon Desert. After all, she had gone to the Peach Blossom Cove from here. But the situation of these two was clearly different. Yizhao said in a deep voice, Now, everyone in the Divine Ruins world should already know about the existence of the Dao Gate realm. And because of the sudden appearance of the Dao Gate realm, it will definitely arouse the curiosity of many people and cause them to come. As he spoke, he looked up at the illusory palace in the sky. If they also see this scene, I'm afraid it will be even more troublesome. This was the first time such a thing had happened in 10,000 years. Who wouldn't want to pass through the Gate realm to investigate? Although this so-called Scarlet Moon Desert was outside of the Divine Ruins world, the palace was clearly an extraordinary existence. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips as countless thoughts flashed through her mind. Of course she had thought of Yizhao's worries. But these things happened too coincidentally. Did it have anything to do with Dabao and the others? Mao Zhen narrowed his eyes and said with some uncertainty, Could Ziqin and the others be in that palace? According to what Chu Luiyue had said, that's strange I couldn't leave the Red Moon Desert. And after Dumpling and Zichen were taken away, such a strange palace appeared. It was inevitable that people would connect the dots. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. There's no point in guessing here. Why don't we take a look ourselves? She was also filled with doubts about the palace that had suddenly appeared and was about to go over to investigate. It would be best if she could find Dumpling and Zichen. A cold glint flashed across Rong Xiu's deep phoenix eyes. His thin lips parted slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly sensed something and his gaze froze. Immediately after, the space in front of Chu Luiyue trembled and two more figures walked out. Seeing them, Chu Luiyue was rather surprised. "Tini, little Zhou?" Tini took a step forward and cupped his fists. "Greetings, Master, Your Highness." Then he looked up slightly and saw Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen behind Chu Luiyue. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared as he greeted the two of them politely and respectfully. "Greetings, clan heads." Xuanhuan was behind him, but he was as silent as usual. Chu Luiyue's gaze swept across the two of them. "Why are you here?" Tini paused. "Ever since you left Peach Blossom Cove, this subordinate has been feeling uneasy. After thinking about it, this subordinate decided to come over and investigate." This explanation was a little vague, but Chu Luiyue didn't pursue the matter. Tini was extremely capable, especially after his rebirth. He was even more concerned about her safety. It was normal for him to sense that something was wrong and come here. However, Chu Luiyue didn't expect him to bring Xuanhuan over. Although the two of them knew each other, they weren't close. Tini didn't even bring the other members of the 13th Empire, but he only brought Xuanhuan. It was really a little unusual. However, this wasn't the time to ask about this. She said, "Don't worry. We're fine. It's just that Dumpling and Zichen are missing. However, you came at the right time. We were planning to go over and take a look. Perhaps we can find them." Xin Yi and Xuanhuan followed her gaze and saw a majestic and mysterious palace standing between heaven and earth in the distant horizon. Because their backs were facing each other, Chu Luiyue didn't see the change in Xin Yi's eyes. When he turned back to look at Chu Luiyue again, his expression had already returned to normal. Xin Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, "Master, that place is strange." "Master, that place looks very strange. Might be dangerous. Are you sure you want to go?" Chu Luiyue looked at him strangely. It wasn't Xin Yi's first day following her. All these years, what kind of dangerous place hadn't she been to? Who knew how many life and death situations she had encountered? Why did he suddenly ask this time? She nodded without batting an eyelid. This might be the only chance to find Dumpling and Zichen. She had to go. Xin Yi glanced at her and quickly lowered his head. "Yes. Then this subordinate will accompany you. Wonderful book house." Chapter 21:12. Contrary to Chu Luiyue's expectations, after Xin Yi asked that question, he didn't stop her. Instead, he directly agreed. It was as if that question just now was just a casual question out of worry. However, Chu Luiyue knew Xin Yi very well. He never spoke nonsense. But since he had already said so, Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered to pursue the matter. The most important thing was to find out what was going on over there. She nodded slightly. "Just be careful." With that, she walked forward. Just as she took a step forward, someone approached her from the side. Rong Xiu walked to her side and held her hand. Chu Luiyue felt slightly relieved, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Just like that, the group walked towards the palace. Xuanhuan stared at the palace and vaguely felt a headache coming on. He rubbed his temples, suppressed these thoughts, and followed them. These people were all very powerful, so their speed was also extremely fast. However, the distance between them and the palace seemed to be the same as before. 2 hours later, Chu Luiyue realized that the distance between them and the palace seemed to be the same as before. There were no changes at all. Sand dunes rose and fell continuously. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing but scorching sand. As Chu Luiyue walked, she kept recalling the various ancient books she had read in the past. The Red Moon Desert had always been very mysterious to the world. Since ancient times, there had been very few rumors related to it. Chu Luiyue had flipped through almost all the books in the Tianling royal family, but the contents she had read were very few. As for the books in the Divine Ruins world, needless to say, they had nothing to do with this place. Even if she racked her brains, she still couldn't figure out what kind of existence this palace was. After thinking for a while, she still couldn't find an answer. She gently squeezed Rong Xiu's hand and asked in a low voice, "Rong Xiu, do you know what's going on?" Rong Xiu paused and shook his head. Chu Liyue felt a little regretful. Even you don't know. As far as she knew, Rongxiu was almost omniscient. He was always aware of many secrets that the outside world had never heard of. She had thought that she would be able to get something out of him. Rongxiu glanced at her. Her eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly. Evidently this matter puzzled her greatly. He said, "Perhaps we'll know when we get there." Chu Liyue nodded. Suddenly she stopped in her tracks and looked to her right. A few figures suddenly appeared. Chu Liyue saw a familiar figure. The group of people quickly noticed the presence of Chu Liyue's group. The young woman in the lead was stunned at first, but then she revealed a joyful expression. "Why are you guys here?" Chu Liyue smiled. "Senior Sister Ru, a long time no see." These people had come from the meteor sect. The woman in the lead was Shirui. Shirui quickly walked over. She blushed when she heard Chu Liyue's words. "We entered the academy at almost the same time. So, I don't dare to be called senior sister." Shirui hadn't been familiar with Chu Liyue in the past. However, she had been very grateful to Chu Liyue ever since she had saved her life. So, she had always been very close to her. "Alright, I haven't thanked you for the list of medicinal ingredients." Shirui suddenly remembered something and said. She was talking about Chu Liyue's agreement to do a medicinal ingredient business with the meteor sect. She hadn't been clear about it at first, but she had inquired about it later. There were many aristocratic families and sects that wanted to establish a relationship with the Peach Blossom Cove. However, Chu Liyue had only accepted the orders of a few of them, and the meteor sect was one of them. "I had always wanted to personally visit and thank you. But I thought that you wouldn't have much time recently. So I put it aside for the time being. I didn't expect that I would meet you here." Shirui explained. Everyone in the Divine Ruins world knew that Chu Liyue had occupied the Peach Blossom Cove and established the U residence. Now, even those first-rate aristocratic families and sects had to respectfully address her as Mistress Yu when they saw her. Shirui looked at Chu Liyue in front of her and sighed in her heart. Who would have thought that she would become such a person who could stir up such a storm in such a short time? Even though she knew that Chu Liyue wasn't an ordinary person, her speed and boldness still shocked her. Chu Liyue didn't seem to mind and smiled. "That's not important. But why are you here all of a sudden?" Shirui blinked her eyes. "We're here because of the same reason as you." Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment. Then she quickly reacted. "You mean, because of the newly appeared Gate Realm?" "Yes." Shirui suddenly realized something. "You, aren't you?" Chu Liyue smiled helplessly. "To tell you the truth, we've been here for more than half a month. We only just found out about the Gate Realm." Shirui nodded in understanding. Yes, Chu Liyue wasn't from the Divine Ruins world. What a coincidence. Shirui's lips curled into a smile. There was a hint of excitement in her words. "This trip is really worth it?" "Huh? What do you mean?" Shirui looked surprised. "You still don't know? The news has spread throughout the Divine Ruins world. Everyone is saying that the secret to breaking through Her Eminence's shackles is hidden behind the newly opened Gate Realm." Chu Liyue frowned. "What did you say?" Shirui pointed at the palace on the horizon. She had noticed it when they had just arrived. "I heard that the secret is hidden in that palace." Chapter 21:13. Chu Liyue didn't expect that so many things would happen in such a short period of time. According to Shirui, all the aristocratic families and clans in the Divine Ruins world had already received this rumor. Moreover, they believed it to be true and rushed here one after another. The people of the world were already yearning to break through to the Supreme God realm. Now that a new door had suddenly appeared, they naturally wanted to investigate it. If it was fake, they would have made a wasted trip at most. They wouldn't have lost anything. But what if it was true? Even if the possibility was extremely small, they still wouldn't give up this opportunity. Chu Liyue turned her head and looked. Sure enough, she saw people appearing in the distance one after another. After seeing the palace at the end of the horizon, these people's faces revealed an excited expression. Then they rushed over one after another. More and more people were gathering in the desert. Chu Liyue's thoughts were surging. At this time she was basically sure that De Bao and the others were behind this. However, she didn't expect that they were in control of such a secret door. She had come to the Red Moon Desert many times, but she had never seen it. She didn't know what they were planning to do this time. Shirui saw that she was lost in thought. So she urged her. "We have to hurry up. Otherwise, others will beat us to it." Chu Luiyue raised her head and smiled. You're right. We have to go there as soon as possible. Since we've met, let's go together. Shiruer's eyes lit up. Okay. Actually, she had wanted to say this when she saw Chu Luiyue and the others. If we go together, we can take care of each other. She winked at Chu Luiyue. I've brought the most powerful elders of the meteor sect with me this time. Chu Luiyue's gaze swept over the people behind her. They were all supreme god experts. It was obvious that the meteor sect had put in a lot of effort this time. The corners of her mouth curved slightly. That's great. Shiruer also took the opportunity to size up the people beside Chu Luiyue. She was very familiar with Rongxiu. Just like before, his strength was unfathomable. As for the two young men beside her, one was calm and indifferent, and it was impossible to tell his cultivation level. The other was refined and taciturn, but it was obvious that he was in the high god realm. Her gaze finally landed on Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen, and a hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. She could not discern the cultivation level of these two people, but the pressure on their bodies that could not be ignored clearly showed their strength. However, the appearances of these two people were very unfamiliar. These two are. Chu Luiyue smiled. Allow me to introduce you. This is Senior Yi Zhao and this is Senior Mao Zhen. Shiruer was stunned for a moment when she heard his clear and relaxed voice. Then her eyes slowly widened. You mean, Yi Zhao? Mao Zhen. It couldn't be the two she was thinking of, right? Chu Luiyue explained. These two seniors also sensed that something was wrong with the gate realm, so they came here first. Shiruer gasped. It's really them. The leaders of two ancient divine beast clans are here at the same time. Because she was too shocked, even the usually polite Shiruer lost her composure for a moment. Her mind went blank for a while and she opened her mouth but did not know what to say. The gods behind her also couldn't hide their shock and hurriedly said, That's right. Greetings, Leader Yi Zhao and Leader Mao Zhen. Only then did Shiruer come back to her senses, and she hurriedly followed suit and bowed. Yi Zhao was expressionless as usual, and Mao Zhen was much more easygoing. She laughed. Don't be so polite, everyone. We came here for a reason. Since Yuer has decided to go with you, we will help each other more in the future. Her words were very polite and amiable. Shiruer and the others were flattered. We wouldn't dare. Everyone knew that the two ancient divine beasts were very arrogant, especially the leaders of their clans. Their statuses were even more unapproachable. It was already difficult to meet them, let alone other things. Now they could actually talk to them face to face and even become allies. No one would believe it if they told others. And all of this was thanks to Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu. After all, when the two of them got married, these two kings who had never met each other went to the Yuntian Tower to celebrate. Everyone in the world of God knew about it. Chu Luiyue raised his chin. Since we know each other, let's go now. The group continued to walk toward the palace. Perhaps it was because of Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao's presence, Shiruer and the others were much more nervous than before. Chu Luiyue smiled helplessly in his heart, but he did not say anything. This was something that could not be helped. On one hand, Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen were famous outside, and the reverence for them was deeply ingrained in everyone's hearts. On the other hand, the two of them were powerful. Even if they deliberately restrained their aura, there was still a faint pressure. Time slowly passed and more people appeared in the desert. Many people noticed Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu's group. The two of them were already peerless in appearance, and they were very eye-catching wherever they stood. In addition, some people gradually recognized Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao, which attracted a lot of attention. This also made those who wanted to come over to say hello and curry favor with them dispel the idea in their hearts. Everyone had a tacit understanding as they walked in the direction of the palace. Chu Luiyue turned a blind eye to all of this. Looking at these people, there was only one thought in her mind. Perhaps the Red Moon Desert had never been so lively. And all of this started from one eye. Chu Luiyue tried to call out to Dumpling and Ziqin in his heart a few more times, but there was still no response. Soon it was nighttime. The temperature plummeted and the night was pitch black. White frost appeared on the ground. All kinds of discussions could be heard from all around. What is this place? It's so hot during the day but so cold at night. What's more strange is that I can actually see the palace in the dark. Didn't they say that the secret to breaking through the threshold to become a god is hidden inside? It's normal for such a sacred object to be stored in a place like this. Hearing these words, Chu Luiyue stared ahead. The thick darkness enveloped the earth, and there were no stars or moon in the sky. However, at the far end of the desert, the palace was brilliantly lit, and the light was brilliant. It stood quietly between heaven and earth, as if it had been there for tens of thousands of years, eternally indestructible. Although it was still shrouded in fog and couldn't be seen clearly, one could still feel the boundless feeling from the palace. Suddenly, a strange fluctuation came from the ring of cosmos. She was startled. This fluctuation came from the armillary's shield. She separated a part of her consciousness and probed into the ring of cosmos in her hand. The armillary's shield flickered with light. Chu Luiyue was suddenly stunned, because she suddenly realized that the light on the armillary's shield seemed to be exactly the same as the light around the palace. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:14. Chu Luiyue's heart seemed to have been hit by something, and the blood in her body seemed to have frozen at this moment. This kind of perception was very subtle. Ordinary people would not be able to distinguish the similarities and differences between the same flickering light. But Chu Luiyue was different. She was the owner of the armillary sky shield. Back then, she had personally attracted the countless mountain fires under the Peach Blossom Cove to temper the armillary sky shield and remove the rust. The scene of the flowing light flying up and enveloping the armillary sky shield was still vivid in her mind. No one remembered it more clearly than her, and no one was more familiar with it than her. At first, she did not notice it, but when the armillary sky shield suddenly moved, she realized that the light on it was exactly the same as the white light surrounding the palace. That kind of aura. She would never mistake it. Where? Chu Luiyue suddenly stopped in her tracks and her companions all looked over. Rong Xiu called out to her softly. Chu Luiyue suddenly came back to her senses and raised her eyes again, staring straight ahead. Could it be that the secret related to the armillary sky shield was hidden in the palace? Back then, Suli had said that the armillary sky shield suddenly appeared and smashed into the Peach Blossom Cove. No one knew its origin and no one knew anything related to it. I just suddenly thought of something. Chu Luiyue shook her head, indicating that she was fine. She took a deep breath and continued walking forward. It was just that her pace was slightly faster than before. Rong Xiu's eyes drooped slightly, and his gaze swept past her hand. That ring was his, so he naturally knew what had happened. An obscure light flashed past his deep eyes. When he raised his eyes again, his expression was still as usual. This small episode did not attract anyone's attention. Another 3 days passed. There were already 40 to 50 people heading towards the palace from all over the desert. Other than those first-rate families and clans, there were also some weaker gangs. Other than that, there were even people who barged in alone. Clearly, the newly opened Dao Gate world was extremely attractive to the various experts in the Divine Ruins world. Even if they could not succeed, it was good to come and see with their own eyes. Moreover, luck was something that was hard to predict. Perhaps a pie had fallen from the sky and it just so happened to hit someone? After trekking for such a long time, the distance between them and the palace was finally reduced. Unfortunately, it was shrouded in white mist. Apart from its rough outline, nothing else could be seen clearly. After the celestial shield produced that ripple, the ripple's range and commotion became increasingly intense as Chu Luiyue got closer and closer. At this point, Chu Luiyue was absolutely convinced that the armillary shield had some kind of close connection with it. 5 days later, everyone finally arrived before the palace. At this moment, everyone finally noticed that the hall was actually floating in midair. There was still an extremely high distance between its bottom and the desert below. It was only because everyone was quite far away and there were continuous sand dunes blocking their line of sight that they did not discover it. Chu Luiyue looked up and carefully sized up the pavilion in the sky, in front of him. Even though they had already arrived here, they still could not see its specific appearance clearly. They could barely make out that it was an extremely magnificent palace. The words on the plaque were covered up very well. Is the secret hidden in this palace? A voice came from the crowd, faintly tinged with excitement. Everyone looked forward with different expressions, but the excitement and curiosity in their eyes were the same. It was obviously impossible to say that they did not have the slightest bit of ambition and expectation after arriving at this place with great difficulty. But now that so many people had arrived, it was a problem to decide who would enter first. Shiru approached Chu Luiyue and said, You are the first to arrive here, and this Red Moon Desert is the territory of your Tianling dynasty. No matter what, you are the most qualified to enter first, right? When she said this, she deliberately raised her voice a little so that the others present could hear. As soon as she finished speaking, there was a commotion in the crowd. They did not know that Chu Luiyue had such a relationship with this desert. If that was really the case, then they should indeed be the first to enter. Some of them wanted to question a little, but after seeing Rong Xiao and the others, they chose to shut their mouths. Chu Luiyue nodded, then looked around and said, "If no one has any objections, I will go first." Although she said it in an inquiring tone, after she finished speaking, she directly lifted her feet and walked forward. Everyone was speechless. "You don't plan to let others go first, do you? Why are you still asking?" In fact, Chu Luiyue really did not care about this order at first. But considering the armillary shield, she still decided to be the first to seize the opportunity. The fluctuations on the armillary shield became more and more intense. Chu Luiyue's heart also beat faster. Step by step, she walked forward and was about to reach the stone door. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly rushed out from the side and beat Chu Luiyue to it. Chu Luiyue's eyes turned cold. Just as she was about to move, a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in her heart. Without hesitation, she flew up and retreated. And that person had already rushed to the stone door. Bang! A transparent barrier suddenly appeared. That person did not react for a moment. When he realized the danger and wanted to retreat in panic, it was already too late. He slammed heavily into the barrier. Strangely, this crash did not make any sound. But then, everyone saw an extremely bloody and cruel scene. That man's body shook and he spat out blood, but his body did not fly out because of the rebound force. Instead, it stuck tightly to the barrier. Then a thin ripple surged on the barrier. That ripple slowly swept over, crushing that person bit by bit and swallowing him. Just like that, his body gradually disappeared under everyone's extremely shocked gazes. Until the end, there was not a single trace left. The scorching wind in the desert blew the coarse sand over. That ripple quietly dissipated, and that barrier also returned to its previous transparent appearance. Finally, it silently disappeared. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, a fresh life was gone just like that. And there was not even a corpse left. Everyone fell into a dead silence. Shock, fear, panic. The scene in front of them was like a basin of cold water that completely extinguished the ardent anticipation and desire in everyone's hearts. Even if they wanted the treasure, they had to be alive. But at this moment, as long as they took a step forward, they would be in hell. Xianxia was so shocked that she broke out in a cold sweat. Thank goodness. Thank goodness you didn't go over just now, or else the person who died would be Chu Luiyue. However, Chu Luiyue only stopped for a short moment and then walked forward again. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:15. Seeing her move, everyone looked at her as if they were looking at a lunatic. Was Chu Luiyue tired of living? It wasn't like she didn't see how tragically that person died just now. She was gambling with her life by rushing forward like this. Xianxia hurriedly shouted, "It's dangerous over there. Don't go first." Chu Luiyue stood still, turned around and asked, "If we don't go now, when should we go? Didn't we walk for so long just to enter this place and take a look?" Xianxia was stunned. After hesitating for a while, she said, Then we can wait for a while. Let's discuss countermeasures together." It was always good to be more prepared. Seeing that Chu Luiyue didn't seem to be listening, Xianxia looked at Rong Xiao again. "Holy Sun, please persuade her." Rong Xiao's lips curved slightly and he followed her. "We have to go in sooner or later. There's no difference." Xianxia was dumbfounded. Why were this couple so stubborn? They were already powerful enough. Even if they couldn't get the rumored treasure, it shouldn't affect them too much, right? Why did they have to risk their lives like this? She wanted to say something else, but she saw that the rest of the people also followed them. Yizhao came to Chu Luiyue's side. "I'll go first." His strength was much higher than Chu Luiyue's. Even if there was any danger, he could block it from the front. Chu Luiyue smiled and shook her head. "Thank you for your kindness, Senior Yizhao, but I don't think I need it." Yizhao looked at her steadily, didn't say anything and took a step back. He knew Chu Luiyue's ability. Since she said so, he would listen to her. Xianxia watched anxiously from behind. In the end, she could only grit her teeth and follow. If something really happened, they might be able to help if they were closer. This time no one tried to snatch it. Everyone's eyes fell on Chu Luiyue. They wanted to see what was waiting for her. Ever since the battle between Peach Blossom Doc and Yi Wentao, Chu Luiyue had risen to fame. Many people wanted to see just how strong she was. Chu Luiyue soared into the air and stood in front of the palace's stone door, facing it from a distance. She held her breath and raised her hand to reach forward. On her slender and fair finger, there was a quaint and magnificent interspatial ring. The armillary heaven shield was among them. When no one was near, that layer of transparent barrier would not flash, and even pressure would not be able to detect it. However, Chu Luiyue clearly remembered the location of the barrier. She slowly reached out her hand. Suddenly, a faintly discernible force appeared in front of her palm. She made up her mind and continued without hesitation. That transparent barrier appeared once again. The people who were waiting anxiously at the side heard the buzzing sound. Their hearts beat violently and almost jumped out of their chests. Some people subconsciously took a few steps back, afraid that they would be affected. However, in the next moment, a shocking scene appeared. Chu Luiyue's hand passed through the barrier smoothly. Not only did the transparent barrier not attack her at all, it even let her pass without a hitch. The scene seemed to have frozen. No one expected the situation to develop in such a strange way. In a strange silence, Chu Luiyue continued to walk forward. Her figure smoothly crossed over the barrier and entered the inside. She was unharmed. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at the transparent barrier behind her. She heaved a sigh of relief. The expressions on everyone's faces immediately became very interesting. What was going on? When that person went forward, he did not have time to react before he was crushed and swallowed by the barrier. Why was everything different when it came to Chu Luiyue? She did not even put up any defense. She entered the barrier easily. Then Rong Xiu strode in with his long legs. By the time everyone reacted, Chu Luiyue and the others had all entered the barrier. Chu Luiyue raised her head at Shiru, who was dumbfounded. Follow her. Oh. Shiru came back to her senses and stammered in response. She was very nervous at first, but when she saw Chu Luiyue's relaxed expression, she inexplicably calmed down a little. She gritted her teeth and followed in without hesitation. It was as if a strong and domineering force scraped across her body. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At this moment she had successfully entered the barrier. Shiru was surprised and happy. You're here? When the elders saw this scene, they followed one after another. Everything went smoothly. The terrifying scene from before did not happen again. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at the palace in front of her. A white mist drifted over. She glanced at it and found that it was formed by abundant heaven and earth energy. The density of the force within the barrier was much higher than that of the Peach Blossom Cove. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and suppressed the waves in her heart. Then she walked forward. She did not need to do it. The energy automatically flowed into her body. Apart from her, everyone else also did the same. Shiru was shocked. I have never seen such abundant heaven and earth energy. What is this place? If I can cultivate in this place. She wondered how fast the breakthrough would be. Hearing her words, the people who were still watching outside became restless again. Some people could not hold back and followed in. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:16. Ah! A hurried and shrill scream came from behind. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks and looked back. Above the transparent barrier, another ripple had appeared out of nowhere, slowly and calmly surging. A young woman was swallowed in the blink of an eye, and she did not even have time to cry out for help. This sudden turn of events caused everyone's hearts to palpitate with fear. How could this be? Those people in front clearly went in successfully. Someone asked with a panicked expression. After Chu Luiyue and the others entered the barrier, 7 or 8 people followed and nothing happened. But this woman, she went to the side. Guesses came from the crowd. She seemed to be a little anxious just now and wanted to be in front, so she went that way. After Chu Luiyue successfully entered, the barrier was no longer hidden. Therefore, everyone followed the path she had taken when she entered. But that young woman was a little eager for quick success, and wanted to be the first to enter from other positions. They did not expect this to happen. Hiss! If that's the case, doesn't that mean that in this huge barrier, only this small area is safe? Someone's question made everyone quiet down, and their expressions were complicated. This guess sounded too fake. The barrier was a hole, and logically speaking, if one could enter from one place, then the other places would be the same. They had never heard of such a division. But the truth was in front of them, and this was the most likely explanation. After a while, someone tried to continue forward, and cautiously passed through the position Chu Luiyue had just walked. Everything went smoothly and no accidents happened. That person let out a long sigh of relief, and at the same time, it made everyone more certain of their previous guess. Many people looked at Chu Luiyue with complicated expressions. Although they had heard some rumors about Chu Luiyue, and knew that this woman was very capable, this situation was far beyond everyone's expectations. Could it be that this barrier only recognized her? Chu Liyue's eyes moved slightly, but she did not say anything and continued to walk forward. At this time she had already reached the stone door at the front. She raised her head slightly, stared at it and finally pushed the door open and entered. The stone door slowly opened in front of him. Chu Liyue quickly glanced inside and was a little surprised. This was an extremely wide area. As far as the eye could see, it was the palace that they had been looking at from afar. In front of the palace was a huge circular plaza. The entire plaza was made of black jade, and the quality was excellent. Chu Liyue glanced at it but did not recognize what kind of jade it was. She had seen a lot of good things and there were very few things that she didn't recognize. Around the square, there were several white jade pillars that were about as thick as two people hugging each other. They were carved with different patterns and looked very mysterious. In Chu Liyue's memory she had never seen such a palace. However, the energy fluctuations on the armillary heaven shield were even more intense. Chu Liyue stepped forward. Right at this moment, an extremely tyrannical aura suddenly came from the square. Chu Liyue heard a faint sound and in the next moment, his vision blurred. The armillary heaven shield flew out from the universe ring on her hand and went straight to the black jade square. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly jumped. He immediately looked up and saw that the armillary heaven shield had flown to the center of the square. It quietly floated above the square, and rays of light overflowed and quickly enveloped it. Then the light poured down like water and poured into the black jade square. At this moment, Chu Liyue finally saw that the center of the black jade square was missing a piece. The most important thing was that the missing piece was exactly the same as the armillary heaven shield. At a glance, it almost made people think that once the armillary heaven shield fell, it would fit perfectly. At this moment, those rays of light flowed out from the armillary heaven shield and poured into the missing piece. There were many patterns around it that were connected to it, and it was mysterious and complicated. Perhaps it was because it was too old, and it was difficult to see clearly and distinguish. However, Chu Liyue could see clearly that the rays of light that were gradually accumulating were surging in all directions along the grooves of these patterns. No, that's not right. Chu Liyue stared at the black jade square. The armillary heaven shield. Perhaps it originally belonged to this place. What's that? A shield? It seems to have flown over Xuanhuan's body? I heard that she did have a very powerful black shield. I think this is it? But why does that thing seem to fit perfectly with the missing piece in the square? More and more people came in. After seeing this scene, all kinds of discussions came one after another. Shiru asked in a low voice. You have been here before? Chu Liyue shook his head. But that barrier and this shield? Shiru bit her lip. Of course she trusted Chu Liyue very much, but others might not. After so many things had happened, it was obvious that Chu Liyue was inextricably linked to this place. She said that she had never been here before, but it was not very convincing. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Even if Shiru didn't say it, she knew very well that everyone was suspecting her. That barrier was extremely terrifying, yet she was able to enter unscathed. This square was mysterious and powerful, and she happened to have a shield that was very likely to come from this place. She had long expected that this place might be related to the armillary heaven shield, but she didn't expect it to be like this. As the lustrous light on the armillary heaven shield flowed down and gradually filled up the hollow space, Chu Liyue suddenly felt that the connection between her and the armillary heaven shield seemed to have weakened a lot. She suddenly thought of something and her heart sank. Could it be that this black jade square was, the power on the heavenly square cauldron is weakening? Su Li's voice suddenly came from the bottom of her heart. Chu Liyue was shocked. What? She quickly gathered her divine sense and found that the transparent hellfire in the heavenly square cauldron was much weaker than before. At first glance, it seemed that it would be extinguished at any time. This situation had never happened before. Chu Liyue raised her eyes again and looked at the black jade square. The power in the armillary heaven shield was being drained bit by bit. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:17. Chu Liyue quickly checked the great azure sun axe and the flowing cloud flying diagram. Fortunately, these two divine artifacts had not encountered such a situation yet. She turned to look at Rongxiu and asked, Rongxiu, is there anything wrong with the Thousand Peaks halberd? Rongxiu shook his head. Chu Liyue relaxed a little. It seemed that it started with the heavenly square cauldron. It was not too late to stop it now. She made up her mind and was about to step forward. However, she could not take this step. There was an invisible pressure in front of her, blocking her from entering the black jade square. After a few attempts, it ended in failure. In the end, Chu Luiyue summoned the heavenly square cauldron. Dong. The transparent square cauldron landed heavily on the ground in front of her with a dull thud. Chu Luiyue looked inside. In just a short while, the karmic fire inside had weakened by a lot. She had to hurry. Chu Luiyue thought to herself. Everyone was shocked when they saw her actions. Soon, someone recognized the heavenly square cauldron. After all, it was one of the 10 great divine artifacts. Not many people had seen it with their own eyes. Now that they saw it, they could not help but feel curious and envious. However, no one dared to show the slightest covetousness. Although the treasure was good, their lives were more important. Not to mention that Chu Luiyue was not to be trifled with, just Rong Xiu and the others were enough to intimidate everyone. Only a fool would choose to snatch Chu Luiyue's things at this time. However, they did not know what Chu Luiyue was trying to do, so they could only guess in their hearts. Bam! Chu Luiyue slammed her palm on the heavenly square cauldron. A vigorous force was injected into it. Boom! Transparent karmic fire rose. Darkness. It was endless, as if there was no escape. When Dumpling opened her eyes, this was the scene she saw. As far as the eye could see, the surrounding area was filled with darkness that was so thick that it seemed like it could not be dissolved. She was originally lying on the ground, but after a moment she vaguely remembered what had happened. She only remembered that she was originally fighting with Ziqin, but as they fought, a whirlpool suddenly appeared under her feet. In a moment of carelessness, she was directly swallowed into the vortex. Since then she had been unconscious and had only woken up now. She had no recollection of what had happened in between. Thinking of this, she hurriedly shouted, "Ziqin? Ziqin." As she shouted, she stood up. The sound of chains rattling could be heard and her body was pulled back. Bang! Dumpling's head hit a hard wall. Ouch! It hurts. Dumpling gritted her teeth and rubbed her head. Halfway through, she finally realized that something was wrong. With a thought, a reddish-gold flame gushed out of her palm. The flame danced, instantly illuminating this side of the world. She looked at her hands and realized that each of her wrists was bound by a black chain. And behind her was a black wall. The other end of the chain was embedded in it. Dumpling was stunned for a long time. Was she locked up? After coming back to her senses, she was immediately furious. "Oh, who has the guts to lay a hand on me? Get out here." Ever since she broke through to the crimson gold celestial phoenix and became the young master, no one had dared to treat her like this. The surroundings were quiet, and only her voice echoed in the distance. This seemed to be an extremely sealed space. Dumpling waited for a while, but there was still no response. She gritted her teeth, intending to break the chain on her wrists. However, after trying, she was shocked to find that the chain was extremely hard, and she could not break free from it at all. After that, Dumpling tried many methods, but it was still useless. This chain was very strange. She kicked the wall hard. Who knew that such a thing would happen when she was having a good time fighting with Ziqin? She wondered if Suddenly Dumpling's expression froze. She realized that the connection between her and Ayu seemed to have been broken. Dumpling finally became nervous. After trying a few more times, she was sure that she had completely lost contact with Ayu. Even if there was a contract between them, it was still the same. For so many years, such a thing had never happened. Dumpling's throat was a little dry, and her heart was beating fast. At this moment, she finally realized that the situation seemed to be more serious than she had expected. "Ziqin?" She shouted a few more times, hoping to get Ziqin's response. If she remembered correctly, when she fell into the vortex, Ziqin seemed to have followed her down. Even if she could not contact Ayu for the time being, it would be good to talk to Ziqin. However, to her disappointment, no matter how she shouted, she could not hear Ziqin's voice. Tuanzi's brows gradually furrowed. Right at this moment, a gust of chilly aura surrounded them from all directions. Dumpling was shocked and instinctively looked up. A huge scarlet eye appeared in front of her. Tuanzi gasped in shock. This eye seemed to be the mysterious existence under the vortex? She gritted her teeth and said word by word, "You're the one who brought me down and locked me up here?" That eye looked at her just like that. A faintly discernible voice seemed to come from a very far place. "Unfortunately, you've only opened the 5th meridian. Compared to Yiling, you're far behind." Dumpling's body stiffened. Yiling was the name of her ancestor. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 21:18. Who exactly are you? Dumpling clenched her fists and stared at the extremely strange eye in front of her. At first she did not think much of the other party, but the words just now, contained too much information. Not many people knew the ancestor's name and this tone, qi. A black stream of light suddenly flew out. Like an extremely sharp knife, it instantly cut open a wound on Dumpling's arm. Dark red beads of blood quickly gushed out. If one looked carefully, they could see a faint golden color within. However, this golden color was extremely obscure and mixed with the rich blood color, it was not obvious. This was the symbol of the purest bloodline. The higher the number of meridians opened, the purer this golden color would be. At this moment, Dumpling had only opened her 5th meridian, and that golden color had just flashed. Dumpling was shocked and quickly covered her wound. She had clearly wanted to dodge just now, but the other party was faster than her. Suddenly, an ice-cold aura entered her body from her wound. Dumpling was stunned. Because this aura was actually an extremely rich and pure energy. After that energy entered her wound, it quickly spread through her limbs and bones, nourishing every inch of her flesh and blood. Dumpling was at a loss. She thought that the other party wanted to kill her, but what was going on? Soon, a second wave of energy entered her body. This dark and sealed cage contained an astonishing amount of heaven and earth energy. Dumpling's body was like a sponge, rapidly devouring this energy. Sensing that the aura around her was rising, Tuanzi gradually felt a little uneasy. The other party could not have spent so much effort to capture her just to help her cultivate, right? But soon, Dumpling knew where this uneasiness came from. The continuous influx of energy gradually exceeded the limits of her body. As time slowly passed, every part of her body started to ache. She was extremely talented, but she had only opened her 5th meridian after all, and there were certain limitations in all aspects. If she swallowed too much energy at once, it would only be harmful to her body. The pain in many parts of her body became more intense. Dumpling could not help but grit her teeth and shout. "What are you trying to do?" That voice came from afar, hoarse and cold. "Naturally, to help you open your meridians." The origin power in Chu Liyue's body was rapidly depleting. The flames within the heavenly square cauldron burned once again. The sparkling light on the armillary heaven shield dimmed significantly. Rong Xiu put one hand behind his back, his eyes dark. Suddenly, with a flash of light, the myriad peaks halberd appeared in his hand. He raised his arm, and the 1,000 peaks halberd flew out in an instant. Chu Liyue looked up and saw that there was a golden flame burning at the end of the 1,000 peaks halberd. As the 1,000 peaks halberd flew forward, the flame drew a straight golden line in the air. At the same time, it quickly spread and formed a long golden tail in the blink of an eye. The 1,000 peaks halberd brushed past the bottom of the armillary heaven shield and flew out. The flowing light that was pouring down was instantly severed by this golden tail. Chu Liyue's eyes lit up, and she immediately summoned the armillary heaven shield back. After escaping the control of the mysterious power on the Black Jade Plaza, the armillary heaven shield quickly flew back to Chu Liyue's hand. Almost at the same time, the flowing light in the groove on the Black Jade Plaza also quickly dissipated and disappeared. The fluctuations on the armillary heaven shield also finally quieted down. Chu Liyue looked at the armillary heaven shield in her hand. It was black and simple and had already returned to its original appearance. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Chu Liyue let out a long breath and put away the heavenly square cauldron. However, she held the armillary heaven shield tightly in her hand. She also summoned Scarlet Heaven Sword. At this moment, the 1,000 peaks halberd had also returned to Rong Xiu's hand. She looked at Rong Xiu and a trace of fluctuation flashed through her eyes. Others did not know, but she knew that what had helped the armillary heaven shield to break free was actually not the 1,000 peaks halberd, but Rong Xiu's golden flame. Just as she was about to ask, a panicked cry for help suddenly came from behind her. Save me." Chu Liyue turned around and saw a man who looked to be in his 30s, looking at his hands with a panicked expression. Chu Liyue's gaze turned slightly, and she was immediately stunned. That man's hands had actually split open with many small bloody wounds, and it looked like they were dripping with blood. This kind of injury was not considered serious, but the key point was, the appearance of these bloody wounds was too strange. A man in a purple robe standing next to that man immediately frowned and asked, "Fourth brother, what happened to you?" Chu Liyue glanced at the person who spoke and she recognized him, Ziguang County's Princess Yao Bin. Back in Fangzhou City they had interacted before, so she had a deep impression of him. Yao Lin was extremely frightened and his voice trembled. There's a problem with the energy of heaven and earth here. Big brother. Don't you all realize that we can't stop this energy from entering our bodies with just our own strength? At first, no one understood what he meant, but after each of them tried, their expressions changed. No. This energy really seems to be unstoppable. Me too. How can this be? If this goes on, won't we be in danger? The crowd immediately became nervous and noisy. The body of a cultivator was like a container. Depending on their strength and other aspects, the amount of energy they could contain was also different. Once the limit was exceeded, the cultivator's body would not be able to bear it and would be damaged. If it was light, they would be injured, and if it was heavy, they would explode and die. After Yao Lin came here, he saw that the energy here was abundant. He was extremely excited and began to crazily devour it. However, when he wanted to stop, he realized that things were already out of his control. At this moment, his body's tolerance had almost reached its limit. Because he could not bear it, the energy overflowed and many wounds appeared on his hands. However, the surrounding heaven and earth energy continued to surge into his body. The situation was getting worse. If this went on, it would not be long before his entire body exploded. How could Yao Lin not be nervous when he realized this? Soon the other people in the crowd were also in the same situation. Yao Bin immediately set up a barrier and surrounded Yao Lin. He wanted to use this method to keep the energy outside. However, he soon realized that this method would not work at all. This was because his barrier could not stop the energy at all. In a short time, Yao Lin's injuries had already spread to his arms. His sleeves were stained with blood. Yao Bin made a prompt decision. I'll send you out now. As long as he could leave this place, everything would be fine. Yao Lin quickly nodded and turned to leave. However, when he turned around, he was stunned. The tall and majestic stone door was already tightly shut. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:19. When did the door close? Why didn't they notice it at all? However, Yao Lin had no time to think about that. He was stunned for a moment before he continued to walk toward the stone door. Yao Bin and the other people from Purple Light County followed behind him. Yao Bin was the first to reach the stone door. He placed his hand on the stone door without hesitation and pushed hard. The stone door did not budge. Yao Bin's heart sank. He was a high god, but he was only one step away from becoming a god. He was definitely not weak. But now he could not even open a door? He took a deep breath and tried again. This time he used all his strength. However, the stone door still did not open. At this moment, there were more and more wounds on Yao Lin's body. Dark red blood stains started to drip down continuously. Let's help. Us too. Seeing that the situation was not right, many people chose to help. Those who could come here were not ordinary people. How could they not know the danger when they saw the situation? If they were trapped here, none of them would be able to escape. Many people gathered in front of the stone door, trying to open it together. However, no matter what they tried, it was futile. Looking at the heavy and majestic stone door, everyone's hearts sank. Fear and anxiety spread everywhere. Even then, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth continued to enter their bodies. More and more people were injured. Some of them could not hold on any longer. What the hell is this place? They thought that it was a treasure trove. Who knew that? Bang. Yao Lin's body swayed, fell to the ground, and fainted. Fourth brother. Yao Bin was shocked. He quickly bent over to help him up. Don't move. Suddenly, a clear voice was heard. Yao Bin turned his head and saw that the person who spoke was Chu Luiyue. He instinctively stopped moving. Master. Master Yu? He wanted to call him Xuanhuan Yu, but when he thought of the fact that Master Yu was now the master of Peach Blossom Cove, he changed his way of addressing him. Purple Light County was a first-class clan, but it was slightly inferior to the Master Yu residents of Peach Blossom Cove. This was a form of respect. Chu Luiyue walked over. He has devoured too much energy and has already exceeded the limits of what his body can bear. If he acts rashly now, his body will explode and he will die. At that time, Princess Yao would be affected as well. Yao Bin clenched his fists. How could he not understand this logic? However, he couldn't just watch Yao Lin die here, right? Everyone please make way. I'll see if I can save him. Chu Luiyue said. Yao Bin was stunned. Master Yu, you mean, you have a way to save him? Chu Luiyue said, it's just a test. If Princess Yao is unwilling, I'm willing. Yao Bin hurriedly nodded. He was very clear that just relying on their strength alone, there was no way to save Yao Lin. If Chu Luiyue was willing to help, perhaps they would have a chance to survive. Didn't he see the people standing behind her? He would just have to make every possible effort. After that, he took a few steps back to make room for Chu Luiyue. When the others saw this, they hurriedly retreated as well. Chu Luiyue walked to Yao Lin's side and squatted down. She put 2 fingers together and placed them on Yao Lin's pulse. Violent energy was rampaging in Yao Lin's body. Yao Lin couldn't control such an astonishing power at all. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before his body and soul were destroyed. Chu Luiyue held her breath and focused. The water droplet in her dantian slowly rotated. Soon, the energy in Yao Lin's body began to flow into Chu Luiyue's dantian. Everyone watched nervously from the side. After a while, they realized that the violent and raging energy in Yao Lin's body gradually subsided. Yao Bin watched for a while and suddenly realized something. Chu Luiyue had transferred all the energy in Yao Lin's body into her own body? Master Yu, what you're doing is too dangerous. Yao Bin wanted to stop her. Although he didn't want to see his 4th brother die like this, they would feel uneasy if others were harmed because of this. Chu Luiyue smiled and lightly said, "That's right. I know what I'm doing." Yao Bin was stunned. Only then did he realize that Chu Luiyue had nothing to do with them. Why would she take the risk for them? If she was willing to do this, there was an 80% chance that she had another trump card. Yao Bin glanced at Rong Xiu, who was standing next to him. He saw that his handsome and noble face was calm, as if he wasn't worried at all. Only then did Yao Bin relax a little. The surrounding people looked at each other. Using this method to save someone? Wasn't Chu Luiyue afraid that something would happen to her? Although she was very strong, she wasn't even a god now. If she did this, she shouldn't be able to last long, right? After about half an hour, Chu Luiyue finally let go of her hand and stood up. All right. This time he should be able to last for a while. Yao Bin went forward and checked carefully. Only then did he realize that the violent energy in Yao Bin's body had been completely extracted. He looked at Chu Luiyue in shock, but found that her expression was normal. It was as if she wasn't affected at all. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and sent a part of her energy into Scarlet Heaven Sword. Clang. The sword rang. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes, raised Scarlet Heaven Sword high, and then slashed down fiercely. A biting cold sword energy went straight to the black jade square in front of them. Break. Boom. The intense sound of energy colliding rang out. The ground suddenly shook. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2120. Crazy energy swept in all directions and several deep trenches spread on the ground. However, the black jade square remained the same, without a single trace left behind. Chu Luiyue's eyes darkened. She had used all her strength in that attack and she could even fight against a god. However, the black jade square's defensive power was extraordinary, and it easily resisted the attack. If he wanted to rely on his own strength to break through it, it was obviously impossible. No one knew better than her how strong and sturdy the armillary shield was. If it really came from the black jade square, then things would be a lot more troublesome. At this moment, Shiru suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and her face was extremely pale. It seemed that she was in the same situation as Yao Lin. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Even if she could help, it was unrealistic for so many people to do it one by one. Moreover, she'd come here this time to look for Tuanzi and Ziqin. Now they hadn't even entered the main door of the palace, and they were already in trouble. It was even harder to predict what would happen later. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat and she walked to the side. Come here. Shiru wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. When she heard this, she immediately followed her without hesitation. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand, and a small shuttle-shaped seed with 2 green tender leaves lay quietly in her palm. Shiru was stunned. What's this? Chu Luiyue raised her chin. Touch its leaves. Shiru didn't understand, but she still did as she was told. She stretched out her hand and carefully touched the tender green leaves. Her fingertips were still stained with blood, leaving a faint trace on it. However, as soon as Shiru withdrew her hand, she saw that the trace of blood quickly disappeared. Immediately after, she felt that there was a subtle connection between her and this little seed. She looked at Chu Luiyue in surprise. Chu Luiyue stared at her. How do you feel now? These words sounded inexplicable to others, but Shiru knew that some kind of shocking change was happening in her body. The crazy energy that was about to overflow seemed to be guided by some kind of power and rushed toward the seed. Even the pain in his body had been reduced by a lot. She looked at Chu Luiyue in disbelief and stuttered. How did you do it? Seeing her reaction, Chu Luiyue knew that this method was working. He immediately relaxed and smiled. That's good. The other elders of the meteor sect also followed them one after another as they heard the strange conversation between the two of them. One of them had sharp eyes and saw the thing in Chu Liyue's hand. After a short moment of shock, he said in shock, "Tu Tian baby?" As soon as he spoke, he realized that he had lost his composure and hurriedly covered his mouth. However, the surrounding people still heard it clearly. They all looked over with different reactions. "Tu Tian baby? Xuanhuan even has this thing? It can't be, right? If it's true, then she has too many treasures in her hands. It has a round belly in the middle and two pointy ends. It has a vigorous vitality. It's definitely a Tu Tian baby. However, it seems that it has just sprouted. I have a vague impression of it. It's rumored that she used this treasure when she took over the Peach Blossom Cove. However, there were too many rumors about Chu Liyue. Therefore, no one could tell whether they were true or false. Therefore, even if someone had heard about it, they didn't pay much attention to it. It was only when they saw Chu Liyue take out one that the crowd believed her. In the past, Chu Liyue had always been careful to hide the existence of the Tu Tian baby. After all, she was worried that it would bring her trouble. However, she didn't have this concern now. Moreover, the Tu Tian baby seemed to be very useful at this time. The elders looked at Ruer. "Second young mistress, just now you?" Ruer's eyes lit up. "This Tu Tian baby sucked out all the excess energy in my body." As soon as she finished speaking, the noisy crowd suddenly quieted down. The elders looked at each other. After a while, one of them asked with uncertainty, "Second young mistress, you mean?" Ruer waved her hand. "Oh, I can't explain it clearly. Yuer, why don't you explain it to them?" Chu Liyue nodded. "The Tu Tian baby can absorb the energy of heaven and earth. When Ruer's blood merged with the Tu Tian baby, it was equivalent to connecting with the Tu Tian baby. The energy that flowed into her body could be transferred to the Tu Tian baby. In this way she could avoid the same situation as Yao Lin." Her tone was light, but every word was no different from a sudden clap of thunder in the ears of the crowd. Almost everyone was facing this kind of danger now. If they could really rely on the Tu Tian baby to solve this problem, it was equivalent to giving everyone a way out. "Yuzhu, is what you said true?" The elder who spoke was still in disbelief and asked carefully. Ruer was displeased. "Elder, do you not trust her or do you not trust me? I've already tested it myself just now. There's absolutely no problem." The elder hurriedly coaxed. "Second young mistress, please don't misunderstand. We were too shocked, so we asked this question. We trust Yuzhu's character and ability the most." Ruer's expression became better. "Yuer is helping us. We can't even thank her enough. If you don't believe me, you can come and try it yourself." Seeing her solemn vow, the elder immediately calmed down and cupped his hands at Chu Liyue. "Yuzhu, I wonder if we can. You are all venerables, so I think the current situation should be fine. However, if you want to test it out, you can." As Chu Liyue spoke, she handed the Tu Tian baby over. That elder solemnly expressed his thanks again. Only then did he bite his finger and lightly touch the soft green leaves. Just like before, the blood was quickly swallowed up. Almost at the same time, the elder's expression changed to one of surprise and joy. "Yuzhu, you're really amazing." Many people secretly exchanged glances. It seemed that this was true? Chu Liyue smiled faintly. She didn't take these suspicions to heart. If it were her, she would also need to verify it before she would believe it. She looked at Yao Bin. "Princess Yao, if you trust me," Yao Bin immediately said. "Yuzhu, what are you saying? We can't thank you enough for saving us just now. Of course we trust you the most." As he spoke, he helped Yao Lin to his feet and walked over to Chu Liyue. Without hesitation, he left Yao Lin's blood on the leaf. Seeing this, many people became restless. However, at this moment, a strange voice suddenly sounded. "Everyone, please think carefully. Xuanhuan is the owner of the Tu Tian baby. If you associate yourself with the Tu Tian baby, it's equivalent to putting your lives in her hands." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 21-21. These words were like a bucket of cold water that poured over everyone's hearts. Many people immediately calmed down. That's right. According to Ruer, the extra energy in her body had been channeled into the Tu Tian baby. But who could guarantee what Chu Liyue would do in the future? What if she wanted more? What if she used the Tu Tian baby to forcefully take away everyone's energy? At that time, it would be difficult to solve this problem. Chu Liyue raised her eyes slightly and looked in the direction of the voice. The person who spoke was a girl in her early 20s. She was wearing a sky blue dress. She had a pretty face and a tall figure. Unfortunately, her expression was fierce. When she looked at Chu Luiyue, there was a hint of resentment, which made her look somewhat sinister. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes slightly. She didn't know this girl. She had never even seen her before. Shiru stepped forward and said coldly, "Nyeruyun, what nonsense are you spouting?" Hearing this name, Chu Luiyue immediately understood. I was wondering who it was. So it's the eldest daughter of the Celestial Sect. The Celestial Sect was also a first-rate family in the Divine Ruins world. Nyeruyun was the only pearl in the palm of the Celestial Sect's sect leader, xianxia. "Ryun, don't be impudent," a middle-aged man standing next to her said in a low voice. Chu Luiyue glanced at him. This person was probably xianxia. However, although these words sounded like a reprimand, xianxia's eyes didn't have any real intention of reprimanding her. Nyeruyun was still as arrogant as before. She sneered, "I'm spouting nonsense? Are you saying that I'm not speaking the truth? Although I don't have the two-tian baby, I know that it's extremely domineering. You guys trust her so easily and put all your wealth in her hands. In the future you won't even know how you died. I'm not that stupid." The surrounding people were even more shaken. Most of them did not have any relationship with Chu Luiyue. If they were related to the two-tian baby like Shiruer and the others, they would be safe for the time being. But what about after that? With the two-tian baby in Chu Luiyue's hands, wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted? The atmosphere suddenly became very subtle. Chu Luiyue stroked his chin. She didn't seem to have interacted with anyone from the Celestial Sect before, but looking at Nyeruyun's expression, it seemed as if she had a deep grudge against her. When did she offend her? As if sensing her doubts, Shiruer whispered, She and Wei Shiping are childhood sweethearts and their feelings for each other are very deep. Before Wei Shiping was chased out of the Wei family, the two of them were already engaged." Chu Luiyue immediately understood. So that was the case. Was Nyeruyun pushing all the blame onto her? Nyeruyun was indeed filled with hatred towards Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu. Originally, she and Wei Shiping were on good terms. They even discussed that after Wei Shiping graduated from Lingxiao College and returned to the family Wei, they would officially get married. Who knew that so many things would happen after that? Wei Shiping's whereabouts were unknown, and their engagement was cancelled. How could she be willing to see the two culprits, Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu, again? Previously, due to various reasons, she didn't dare to make a scene. Now that the opportunity was here, she definitely wouldn't let it go. Chu Luiyue wasn't angry. She smiled and said politely, "Lady Nia, I think you're overthinking. I don't intend to help you, so your worries are unnecessary." Pfft. Shiru was originally very angry, but when she heard this, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. "That's right. Nyeruyun, it's not your turn yet. What right do you have to speak? Aren't you thinking too highly of yourself?" Nyeruyun's face instantly flushed red and white. I'm just reminding everyone not to fall for your trick. Who knows if you're thinking of using this opportunity to do something?" Chu Luiyue picked up the heaven-wrecking holy seed, gently turned the two small leaves and nonchalantly said, "Lady Nia, to be honest, when Nan Yifan died, I didn't even put in so much effort. How capable are you that you're worth my time?" When she said this, there was a faint smile on her lips, but this smile didn't reach her eyes. The frosty look in her eyes made people feel fearful. Nyeruyun choked, and the expressions of many people around them changed. In the Divine Ruins world, the Nan family and the Yi family were even stronger than these so-called first-rate families and clans. Yi Wentao had been defeated by her, and Nan Yifan had died in Peach Blossom Cove. The Nan family was in shambles and had suffered heavy casualties. If she really wanted to make a move on everyone present, she had the time and strength. Why did she have to make a move at this time? Nyeruyun's guess seemed to make some sense, but when she thought about it carefully, it actually didn't hold water. Xianxia stood up and cupped his hands. "Master Yu, please don't take it to heart. Ryun is still young and immature. It's inevitable that she would say the wrong thing under impulse." Sect Master Nia. Rongxiu suddenly spoke. "If I remember correctly, Nyeruyun is already 23 years old. She's a few years older than our Yu. She doesn't have a brain, so there's no need to talk about age." This time, Xianxia's expression turned ugly. Rongxiu looked around. "You has always been kind and helpful. I don't have that much patience. If you want to live, do as you see fit. If you want to die, I won't stop you. After all, the energy here is abundant. Two-tian baby doesn't lack that bit of fertilizer." His words made everyone speechless and their expressions changed. It was very interesting. Chu Luiyue silently gave him a thumbs up in her heart. Her man was usually too lazy to speak, but when he did, it was so direct that it pierced people's hearts. Nie Ruyun turned and left angrily. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21-22. Nie Hongjie frowned and said, "Goodbye." Then he turned and chased after them. The celestial sect left quickly. Chu Luiyue looked at their backs and narrowed her eyes. Shiru thought that her anger had not subsided. It's not worth getting angry over these people. Chu Luiyue shook her head. I'm not angry. I'm just thinking. They seem to be very confident and are not worried about meeting the same situation as Yao Lin and the rest. She recalled that the celestial sect members, including Nie Ruyun, did not seem to show any signs of discomfort from the beginning to the end. This was obviously not right. Among those present, the eminent god was still fine. Almost all of the high gods had fallen and could not take it anymore. But they were fine. If they were worried about this problem, they would not even have time to hug Chu Luiyue's thighs. Why would they offend her? No matter how stupid Nie Ruyun was, she would not care about such things at a time of life and death. Shiru thought for a while and suddenly said, "Oh, right. I remember that one of the 10 great sacred artifacts, the snow-blowing goblet, is with them. That item is similar to the Tu-Tian baby and can store a lot of heaven and earth energy." It was said that when Nie Hongjie was not strong enough, he would take out the snow-blowing goblet and rely on the astonishing power stored inside to crush his opponent. He won every battle. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. I was wondering. Nie Ruyun was fine, but Nie Hongjie's attitude was also very presumptuous. With such a trump card, it was no wonder that they were so bold. Yao Bin took a step forward and said seriously, "Purple Light County is willing to stand by Lord Yu's side." This was a public declaration of his intention to stand on Chu Luiyue's side. After all, if not for Chu Luiyue, Yao Lin would have died and their situation would not be any better. Yao Bin was very grateful to Chu Luiyue, so he took the initiative to stand up without hesitation. Chu Luiyue smiled. Although she didn't care about everyone's attitude, Yao Bin's actions still made her feel a lot better. Then Yao Bin cut his finger and connected himself to the heaven-wrecking holy seed. Everyone else from Purple Light County did the same. After the Meteor sect and the Purple Light County left, some other people came over to ask for help. Only a few people chose to follow the Heavenly Martial sect. Chu Luiyue didn't mind. The reason why she was willing to help was because it was indeed a piece of cake for her. Moreover, it could also help the Tu-Tian baby grow up. Nie Ruyun was right about one thing. When these people accepted Chu Luiyue's help, it was equivalent to entrusting half of their lives to Chu Luiyue. She had taken the initiative, so there was nothing to worry about. Chu Luiyue looked at the Tu-Tian baby in her hand. At this moment, other than her, there were already 31 people connected to it. She could clearly feel the subtle connections, and she could also feel the abundant energy flowing into it. The leaves of the Tu-Tian baby swayed gently, and it became even more verdant. Chu Luiyue took a few glances at it and put it away. Bang! At this moment, the door of the palace suddenly opened. Chu Luiyue turned around abruptly. Everyone present looked over at the same time and they were all shocked. No one expected the door to open at this moment. They didn't do anything. Chu Luiyue looked over and her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't see anything behind the door except for a thick black color. Then the eye suddenly appeared. Chu Luiyue's expression became serious, and she rushed over without hesitation. The suffocating darkness and silence shrouded Dumpling. She lay on the ground, curling up in pain. Intense pain came from all over her body, causing her to tremble slightly. Every inch of her muscles, bones, blood, and flesh seemed to be dismembered. It was as if countless sharp knives were madly cutting her body. Even when she was going through the tribulation, she had never suffered such torture. However, the energy continued to flow into her body. From the initial desperate struggle to the current haggard state, Dumpling didn't know how much time had passed. Her mind was also gradually becoming dizzy. If not for the constant stimulation of the pain all over her body, she would have fainted long ago. "You," she murmured in a low voice, and her breath was weak, filled with endless longing and desire. Suddenly, a violent crash came from the wall behind her. Bang! Crack! On the wall, a long crack suddenly appeared. Hearing the sound, Dumpling struggled to look up, but she didn't even have the strength to lift her fingers. The eye that was originally staring at Dumpling heard the noise, and a trace of anger and bloodlust flashed past. "How dare you!" Then a black chain quickly flew out and directly penetrated the wall. Boom! A hole appeared in the wall. A shadow tightly bound by the chain was dragged in. Was Zichen. His body was stained with blood as if he had just been through a fierce battle. In particular, there were 2 bloody holes on his wrists and blood was gushing out. He had paid a terrible price to escape. At this moment, his ankles were once again bound by the chain, and he was dragged in the direction of the eye. When he passed by Dumpling, he gritted his teeth and pulled Dumpling into his arms with one hand, and grabbed the chain beside Dumpling with the other hand. The other part of the chain was still on the wall that hadn't collapsed. Zichen's pull immediately tightened the chain. Dumpling opened her eyes in a daze and saw a familiar cold and handsome face. Crush. Another chain flew out and pierced Zichen's shoulder, nailing him to the ground. A trail of warm blood splashed onto Dumpling's face. The scene in front of her was instantly covered with a layer of scarlet. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21-23. The thick stench of blood filled her nostrils. It was almost nauseating. The rapidly spreading blood color in front of her eyes provoked Tuanzi's last nerve, which was called rationality. Zichen. She wanted to support Zichen, but she could only feel something sticky on her hand. She looked down and saw that his left shoulder had been pierced and was badly mutilated. Because he was wearing black clothes, the blood had seeped into his clothes and soaked a large area. Dumpling's hand trembled slightly. You overestimate yourself. The voice came from behind her, carrying undisguised contempt and disdain. Do you think that you're so great just because you have a great phoenix dragon wing bone? Even Dumpling, who had the purest bloodline, could not fight back. What could a legendary 3-eyed eagle do? Zichen gritted his teeth and quickly glanced in that direction. After following Dumpling down, he lost consciousness. When he woke up again, he was already trapped in an incomparably dark cage. His wrists were also shackled by 2 chains. However, he quickly realized that Dumpling seemed to be only a wall away from him. She broke free from the chains without hesitation and even paid a terrible price for it. Now that he looked at it, there was indeed something wrong with that eye. Zichen took a deep breath and switched Dumpling to his right hand. Only then did he see the wound on Dumpling's arm. He frowned. Dumpling's aura was very unusual. This was very similar to when she was about to open her meridians. When he thought of this, Zichen was suddenly shocked. Dumpling had just opened her 5th meridian not long ago. Logically speaking, it was impossible for her to continue opening her meridians in such a short time. When he saw the surging aura around her as if it would explode at any time, he felt even more uneasy. If Dumpling forcefully opened her meridians now, it would only be harmful. He had to leave this place as soon as possible. When Zichen thought of this, he suddenly grabbed the chain that nailed him to the ground. Because he used so much force, his knuckles were faintly blue. When Dumpling saw this, her heart skipped a beat. She immediately pressed his hand down. Zichen. No. Whoosh. Zichen pulled the chain out by force. Bright red flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The next moment he hugged Dumpling tightly, got up and planned to run away. A blood-colored Xian formation suddenly appeared above their heads. A terrifying pressure descended, immediately trapping them in place, unable to break free. Zichen spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to his knees. One of his hands was on the ground, while the other hand was carefully protecting Dumpling in his arms. Tuanzi's eyes were abruptly burning with golden flames. She looked at the blood-colored profound formation above her head and gradually clenched her fists. In the past, she had always wanted to be Zichen's big sister. However, she had never expected that he would be the one to protect her at such a critical moment. The blood in Dumpling's body surged as if it was about to burst out at any moment. She retracted her gaze and looked at the eye. You can't touch my people. A totem flashed between her eyebrows. On the other side, Chu Luiyue had already rushed into the main hall as fast as she could. The moment she stepped into the main hall, an extremely bright and dazzling light suddenly poured down from above. The strong light stung her eyes, and she subconsciously turned her face to the side. After a moment, she raised her eyes again and looked forward. When she saw the scene in the main hall clearly, she was instantly stunned. This was an extremely tall circular palace with a dome above. The light shone down from above. The surrounding walls were interlaced with black and white jade, and ancient and mysterious relief sculptures were carved on them. On the jade disc, there were holes of various sizes that had been hollowed out. In each hole, there was a ball of light quietly suspended. The colors were different and extremely gorgeous. There was a faint divine pressure, and there was a boundless and ancient aura everywhere, as if no one had set foot in this place for thousands of years. Chu Luiyue stood at the entrance and slowly glanced at the balls of light. The eye was nowhere to be seen. She lifted her feet and walked into the main hall. The people behind her also followed in one after another. Chu Luiyue looked around and searched again. The cold and gloomy aura seemed to have never appeared. However, she was sure that she had not seen wrongly. The eye was indeed hidden here. A venerable one divine artifact. A voice filled with surprise suddenly sounded. This voice immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the main hall. Chu Luiyue also looked over. Xianxia had also followed in at some point. At this moment he was standing in front of the jade wall with a longbow in his hand. In the hole beside his hand, the originally flickering ball of light had disappeared. Obviously this bow was the one he had taken out from there. He was extremely excited and the wrinkles on his face seemed to have smoothed out a lot. Just now he only felt that the aura of the ball of light was rather unusual. He was curious and wanted to try and see if he could take it out. In the end, just as his finger touched the ball of light, it fell into his hand. The entire process was extremely smooth. What he did not expect was that it was a venerable one divine artifact. He had really picked up a treasure. When everyone saw this, they looked at each other with unconcealable shock in their eyes. What kind of place was this? How could one get a venerable one divine artifact so easily? Ruiyue reacted quickly. When he saw this, he immediately thought of something. He also came in front of the jade wall, casually chose a ball of light and took out the item inside. It was a small green jade bottle. Seeing that it was not a venerable one divine artifact, Ruiyue was a little disappointed. He casually pulled out the jade bottle's stopper. What is this? A strong medicinal fragrance filled the air. Xianxia immediately exclaimed. Dragon recovery pill? This was a medicinal pill of the Grand Physician level. He was a Grand Physician himself, so he naturally knew how precious this dragon recovery pill was. When Ruiyue heard this, the regret and disappointment from before were swept away. He asked excitedly, Father, is this really a dragon recovery pill? Xianxia walked over, took a closer look and laughed. Of course it's real. When have I ever lied to you? Ruiyue, you're really amazing. You just casually picked it up and you actually got a medicinal pill of this level. Ruiyue was very proud. He carefully put away the bottle of dragon recovery pills. Father is still the best. After all, he had a genuine venerable one divine artifact in his hands. More importantly, if it weren't for him, they wouldn't have thought that these balls of light actually hid such a treasure. Seeing that the father and daughter had easily put away two rare treasures, the crowd immediately became restless. Many people walked to the jade wall and took out the balls of light from the cave. Sure enough, there were divine artifacts, pills, magic arts and extremely high-level Shen formation diagrams. All kinds of treasures were endless. Moreover, what was even more shocking was that the treasures that Xianxia and his daughter had obtained before were actually ordinary here. Seeing that more and more people had obtained the treasures, Chu Luiyue gradually frowned. What is this place? Wonderful book house. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.